Have you ever wondered how many secrets are still buried within the pages of history? Think about it. We live in a world where we can access almost any piece of information instantly. Yet there are mysteries from centuries ago that continue to evade even the brightest minds. These aren't just small gaps in our knowledge. They're monumental puzzles that challenge everything we think we understand about our past. From vanished civilizations to inexplicable artifacts, these enigmas remind us that history is far from a solved puzzle. It's a living, breathing mystery waiting to be unraveled. That sense of wonder and curiosity is exactly what we're diving into today. Imagine standing before an ancient structure whose purpose we can only guess at, or holding an artifact that seems to defy the technological capabilities of its time. These aren't just stories, they're real, tangible mysteries that historians, archaeologists, and scientists have poured their lives into solving, yet they remain stubbornly out of reach. Each one is a captivating riddle that invites us to look closer, to question what we've been told, and to marvel at the sheer audacity of the unknown. It's this thrilling chase for answers that connects us all, whether you're a seasoned expert or someone who simply loves a good mystery. There's something irresistibly compelling about these gaps in our collective story. So join me as we embark on a journey through 30 of the most baffling historical events that still leave experts scratching their heads. We'll explore disappearances that defy logic, discoveries that rewrite what we thought was possible, and phenomena that science still can't fully explain. This isn't just a list of unsolved cases. It's an invitation to step into the shoes of those who dare to ask the big questions, to feel the excitement of the hunt, and to rediscover the magic that lies hidden in our past. Get ready to look at history in a whole new light, because some mysteries are just too fascinating to stay buried. Our journey into the unknown begins not with a grand empire, but with a small, fragile community on the edge of the known world. In 1587, a group of approximately 115 English men, women, and children established a settlement on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for desperately needed supplies, a voyage he expected to take only a few months, but history had other plans. A major war between England and Spain erupted, and every available ship was pressed into service to fight the Spanish Armada, trapping White in his homeland for 3 long years. When he finally managed to return in 1590, he stepped back onto the sandy shores of Roanoke to find nothing. The entire colony had simply vanished. The houses and fortifications had been carefully dismantled and removed, suggesting a planned departure, not a panicked flight. There was no evidence of a struggle, no graves, and no signs of the people he had left behind. The only clue was a single word carved into a fort post, Croatoan. This single word would become one of history's most enduring and frustrating puzzles. So, what happened to them? The most widely accepted theory is that the colonists, facing starvation and hostile relations with some local tribes, split into smaller groups and integrated with nearby indigenous communities, specifically the Croatan people, who are known to be friendly. The carved word seems to point directly to this solution. Later reports from other English explorers include accounts of grey-eyed natives and villagers who built European-style houses, potentially supporting this idea of assimilation. However, this theory is not without its problems. If they simply moved in with the Croatans, why did they leave no clearer message for White? Why dismantle everything so completely? Other, more tragic theories suggest the colony was wiped out by disease, a devastating storm, or an attack from a rival tribe. But these explanations fail to account for the lack of bodies or the orderly state of the abandoned site. This absence of concrete evidence has, over the centuries, allowed for more speculative ideas to flourish. Some have proposed that the Spanish, who had established outposts in Florida, marched north and destroyed the settlement to eliminate English competition in the New World. Others have looked to the supernatural, weaving tales of ancient curses or even otherworldly abductions. The mystery of the lost colony endures precisely because that single word, Croatoan, is just enough of a clue to suggest an answer, but not enough to provide any certainty. It's a blank slate onto which we can project our own imaginations, a ghost story from the very first chapter of American history that reminds us how fragile our foothold on this continent truly was. It stands as a permanent question mark, a community that disappeared into the vast, uncharted wilderness, leaving behind a mystery that continues to captivate and haunt us. While the fate of Roanoke remains a haunting void in the historical record, our next mystery presents the exact opposite problem, an object of such staggering complexity that its very existence seems to defy the timeline of human innovation. Imagine a diver in the year 1900 exploring a 2,000-year-old Roman-era shipwreck off the coast of the tiny Greek island of Antikythera. Amidst the typical treasures of marble statues and glassware, he surfaces with the corroded, lumpy remains of what appears to be a worthless piece of bronze and wood. It was set aside with the other insignificant finds, seemingly just another corroded artifact. For nearly a year, it sat unnoticed until a sharp-eyed archaeologist saw a crack in the object and noticed something glinting inside, a gear. This was no mere lump. It was the single most technologically advanced artifact to survive from the ancient world. We now know it as the Antikythera Mechanism, a device so advanced that nothing remotely comparable would appear again for over 1,000 years. Dating back to around 100 BC, this intricate bronze device has been called the world's first analog computer. Using a sophisticated system of at least 30 interlocking meshed gears, all precisely hand-cut from bronze, it could perform astonishingly complex calculations. By simply turning a hand crank on the side, the user could accurately predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and it even accounted for the moon's irregular orbit, a subtlety we now explain with a concept called orbital eccentricity. The front dial featured a sophisticated zodiac calendar, while the back had 2 spiral dials tracking the timing of the ancient Olympic Games and predicting eclipses. This wasn't a tool for navigation. It was a sophisticated educational and philosophical device, a portable planetarium that modeled the very mechanics of the known universe inside a wooden frame the size of a large shoebox. The immense sophistication of the mechanism is precisely what creates the central mystery. We have no surviving text, no blueprints, and no mentions of such a device from this period. The knowledge required to design and build it a deep understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and precision engineering seems to have vanished from history completely after this point. Who built it? The leading theory points to the school of thought connected to the legendary Archimedes in Syracuse, though the device itself was likely constructed a century or so after his death. Perhaps it was a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, the pinnacle of a scientific tradition that was snuffed out by the rising tide of the Roman Empire, which prized practical engineering over abstract Greek theoretical science. How was this knowledge lost for so many centuries? That may be the most haunting question of all. It suggests that our linear view of human progress, a steady climb from primitive to advanced, is fundamentally flawed. Instead, history might be a story of peaks and valleys, with brilliant sparks of genius that flare up and are tragically extinguished, leaving future generations to rediscover what was once already known. If the Antikythera Mechanism represents a staggering peak of ancient scientific knowledge, our next artifact is a descent into pure, impenetrable mystery. It is a book that refuses to reveal its secrets, a 440-page puzzle that has defied every attempt at understanding for over 6 centuries. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, this enigmatic codex is written entirely in an unknown script, a flowing text of strange characters and glyphs that has never been seen anywhere else on Earth. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, its vellum pages are filled with bizarre, vibrant illustrations that only deepen the confusion. There are drawings of plants that are completely unidentifiable, possessing roots and leaves that belong to no known botanical species on our planet. Other sections feature intricate astrological diagrams with zodiac symbols arranged in unfamiliar celestial patterns, and perhaps most curiously, countless pages are filled with illustrations of naked women, often depicted bathing in or connected to a complex network of green, tubular pipes and vessels, suggesting some unknown biological or alchemical process. Since its rediscovery in 1912 by a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich, the manuscript has been a siren call for the world's top cryptographers and codebreakers. Many of the same minds who cracked enemy codes during the World Wars turned their formidable intellects to deciphering this book, and all of them ultimately failed. The text possesses a statistical structure that suggests a real language rather than random gibberish. The word lengths and character patterns follow linguistic rules, yet it matches no known tongue. This has led to a myriad of theories, each more fascinating than the last. Some researchers have proposed it is a cipher for a known language, an incredibly complex code meant to protect valuable secrets, perhaps related to alchemy or early medicine. Others argue it is an example of a lost natural language, one that died out without a trace. Then there are the more outlandish ideas that it was the work of a medieval prankster crafting an elaborate, meaningless hoax to sell to a wealthy patron, or even that its origins are not of this world, a notion that persists despite a complete lack of evidence. The true frustration of the Voynich Manuscript lies in its tantalizing feeling of order. The illustrations are grouped into distinct thematic sections: herbal, astronomical, biological, and pharmaceutical, implying a logical, organized manuscript with a clear purpose. You can almost sense the author's intent, the desire to communicate something important, yet the message remains forever locked away behind an unbreakable linguistic barrier. It stands as a humbling reminder that for all our modern knowledge and technological prowess, there are still pages from the past that we simply cannot read. It is a ghost of a thought, a complete idea from a human mind that has been utterly lost to time, challenging our very assumption that we can ever fully understand the depths of our own history. From the silent, cryptic pages of an unreadable book, we turn to a mystery that played out on the open, empty expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a story that has become the archetype of every ghost ship tale ever told, yet the truth behind it remains as elusive as ever. In November 1872, a Canadian merchant ship named the Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor bound for Genoa, Italy. Her hold was filled with 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol, a common industrial solvent. On board was Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 experienced seamen. It was a routine, if slightly delayed, transatlantic crossing. A month later, on December 4th, the vessel was spotted adrift near the Azores Islands by the crew of another ship, the Dei Gratia. What they discovered upon boarding would become the foundation of one of history's most enduring maritime puzzles. The scene that greeted the crew of the Dei Gratia was one of profound and unsettling confusion. The Mary Celeste was seaworthy, her hull sound and her mast intact. She was under partial sail, drifting gently. There was a month's worth of food and fresh water in the stores. The crew's personal belongings and valuables were still in their quarters, completely untouched. The cargo of alcohol was largely still in place, with only 9 barrels found empty. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of violence, and no damage that would indicate a catastrophic leak or a collision. Yet the entire complement of 10 souls was gone. The ship's single lifeboat was missing, suggesting a deliberate, if frantic, abandonment. The last log entry was dated 10 days earlier and noted no distress, only a position several hundred miles from where the ship was found. It was as if the captain and his family and crew had simply evaporated into thin air. This complete absence of obvious cause has spawned a century and a half of speculation, with theories ranging from the plausible to the utterly fantastic. The initial investigation at the time pointed to the cargo. The theory suggests that fumes from the denatured alcohol leaked from the 9 empty barrels, perhaps building up in the hold. Captain Briggs, fearing a massive explosion, might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat as a temporary safety measure, keeping it tethered to the ship. A sudden gust of wind could then have snapped the line, leaving the lifeboat adrift while the supposedly doomed Mary Celeste sailed on, perfectly safe. While this is a neat and logical explanation, it has a major flaw. Denatured alcohol fumes are not explosive unless in a very high concentration in an extremely confined space, a scenario experienced sailors would have been unlikely to panic over. Other theories have pointed to the sea itself. The area is known for waterspouts and sudden, violent squalls. Perhaps a waterspout or a freak wave struck the ship, causing everyone to believe it was about to sink. They scramble into the lifeboat to avoid being dragged down, only to watch helplessly as the ship rights itself and sails away without them, condemning them to the merciless ocean. Another idea involves a submarine earthquake or seaquake, which can create a sudden, terrifying rumbling and shaking of a vessel without leaving any visible damage, potentially spooking a crew into abandoning a perfectly good ship out of sheer, unadulterated terror. Then there are the more sinister explanations. Could it have been piracy or mutiny? But this is thoroughly undermined by the untouched personal effects and valuable cargo. An attack by a giant squid was a popular Victorian-era notion, but it fails to explain the orderly departure. Some have even ventured into the realm of the paranormal, suggesting the ship crossed paths with some unexplained force or fell into a mysterious rift in time. The truth is, every proposed solution creates as many questions as it answers. The enduring power of the Mary Celeste story lies in its perfect storm of ordinary details that lead to an extraordinary, inexplicable outcome. It is a blank canvas onto which we can project our deepest fears of the ocean's vast, indifferent power and the fragile line between routine safety and utter, inexplicable catastrophe. But while the silent enigma of the Mary Celeste unfolded on the vast, empty ocean, our next mystery is one that is heard rather than seen, a phenomenon that is both deeply personal and frustratingly public for those who experience it. Imagine trying to fall asleep in the quiet of your own home, only to be plagued by a persistent, low-frequency droning, a deep, vibrating hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. For a significant percentage of the population in and around the small, artistic community of Taos, New Mexico, this isn't a hypothetical scenario, it's a daily reality. Since the early 1990s, residents have reported hearing what is now famously known as the Taos Hum, a low, steady rumble that is often compared to the sound of a distant diesel engine idling. The most baffling aspect, not everyone can hear it. This selective audibility has turned a local curiosity into a full-blown scientific and psychological puzzle. The characteristics of the hum are as consistent as they are strange. Those who hear it, often called hearers, describe it as a low-frequency sound, typically between 30 and 80 Hz, right at the lower threshold of human hearing. It's often more prominent indoors than outdoors and is usually heard more clearly at night when the background noise of the modern world dies down. For some, it's a mild annoyance, a constant background presence. For others, it is a life-altering torment, causing chronic sleep deprivation, dizziness, headaches, and an inability to concentrate, leading to profound frustration and even despair. The fact that it's inaudible to the majority of people, including many family members of the hearers, adds a layer of social isolation to the physical discomfort, with sufferers often fearing they won't be believed or will be thought to be imagining things. This very personal nature of the experience has led researchers down two primary investigative paths, one looking for a physical, external source, and the other exploring internal, physiological or psychological causes. On the physical side, the investigations have been exhaustive. Teams from prestigious institutions, including the University of New Mexico and even the federal government, have descended upon Taos with sophisticated audio equipment, aiming to pin down the hum's origin. They've tested for everything from industrial machinery and power lines to secret military communications and underground gas pipelines. Some have pointed to the region's unique geology, suggesting that the hum could be the result of massive subterranean rock layers shifting and generating a very low-frequency seismic rumble. Yet, despite all this effort, no external sound source has ever been recorded that matches the description of the hum, or that can explain why only some people are affected. This failure to find a clear external trigger has given weight to the other set of theories which look inward. One compelling explanation is that hearers are experiencing a form of tinnitus, a perceived sound with no external cause. However, standard tinnitus is usually a high-pitched ringing, not a low-frequency hum, and it doesn't typically account for the fact that the Taos hum seems to be geographically clustered. Another fascinating possibility is that the hearers possess a unique physiological trait, an unusual sensitivity to very low-frequency sound waves that most people's ears simply filter out as irrelevant background noise. Their auditory systems might be acting like a built-in amplifier for a sound that is actually present in the environment at a level too faint for others to consciously perceive. Then there is the psychological angle, the power of suggestion. Once a phenomenon is named and publicized, like the Taos hum, it can create a feedback loop where people who might not have noticed a benign sound before suddenly become hyper-aware of it, their brains latching onto it and amplifying it, transforming a whisper into a roar that can't be ignored. The Taos hum endures as a modern acoustic mystery because it sits at the uncomfortable intersection of the objective and the subjective. It feels completely real to those who hear it, with tangible, physical effects on their lives, yet it remains stubbornly unmeasurable by our best instruments. It challenges our understanding of human perception and reminds us that the map of reality is not the same for everyone. Is it a secret industrial sound, a geological heartbeat, a mass neurological event, or a combination of all these factors? For now, the people of Taos are left with only the hum itself, a deep, vibrating question mark that hangs in the desert air. If the low, persistent hum of Taos represents a mystery of sound, our next event is a terrifying spectacle of inexplicable movement, a chapter from history that reads more like a dark fairy tale than a recorded epidemic. In the sweltering heat of July 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a part of the Holy Roman Empire that is now in modern France, a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into the street and began to dance. This was not a dance of celebration or joy. It was a compulsive, frantic, and uncontrollable jig. She danced alone for days, her feet bleeding, her body exhausted but utterly unable to stop. Within a week, the number of dancers had swelled to over 30. By the end of the month, the streets were filled with over 400 people convulsing, leaping, and twisting in an agonizing frenzy. This was the dancing plague of 1518, a bizarre and deadly event that claimed the lives of dozens through sheer exhaustion, heart attack, or stroke, and it remains one of history's most chilling examples of mass hysteria. The city's initial response, based on the prevailing medical theory of the time, was to assume the dancers were suffering from a treatable physical ailment caused by an excess of hot blood. The council decided that the best cure was to let them dance it out, even going so far as to clear a public square and hire musicians and professional dancers to encourage the afflicted. This, of course, had the opposite of the intended effect. The music and the communal atmosphere only served to amplify the mania, pulling more and more people into the terrifying rhythmic trance. When it became clear this was not a solution but a fuel for the fire, the authorities changed their strategy entirely. They banned public dancing and music and organized a series of processions to nearby shrines, believing the plague to be a curse sent by an angry saint. It was only after these religious interventions that the dancing finally, gradually subsided. So what could have caused such a surreal and tragic event? Modern science offers several compelling theories, though none provide a definitive answer. One of the most prominent explanations is mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria where psychological distress manifests as physical symptoms in a group of people. Strasbourg at the time was a city under immense strain, suffering from famine, extreme poverty, and a wave of terrifying diseases like smallpox and syphilis. The superstitious populace lived in constant fear of divine wrath. In such a pressurized environment, the sight of one person's breakdown could have acted as a psychological trigger, causing others to subconsciously mimic the behavior in a powerful, shared expression of deep-seated societal anxiety and despair. Another strong contender is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain of the European diet at the time. This fungus contains chemicals closely related to lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD, which can cause powerful hallucinations, muscle spasms, and convulsions. An outbreak of ergotism, known as St. Anthony's fire, could theoretically explain the involuntary movements. However, this theory has significant flaws. While ergotism causes painful burning sensations and gangrene, it doesn't typically cause coordinated, rhythmic dancing for days on end. Furthermore, the hallucinations from ergot are usually terrifying, not something that would compel sustained, if agonizing, movement. Other theories point to religious cults, perhaps a group practicing a forbidden, ecstatic dance ritual that spiraled out of control, or even a form of seizure disorder spread through social contagion. The truth is, the dancing plague likely cannot be pinned on a single cause. It was probably a perfect storm of factors, a population pushed to the brink of psychological collapse, potentially contaminated food supplies, and a deeply held belief in supernatural punishment. It stands as a stark reminder of the powerful and sometimes terrifying connection between the mind and the body, and how easily the fabric of a society can unravel under pressure. The citizens of Strasbourg weren't just dancing, they were acting out a physical symptom of the collective trauma of their age, their bodies moving to a rhythm of fear that we can still faintly hear today. Leaving behind the haunting rhythms of Strasbourg, we leap forward to the 20th century, where a new kind of mystery was born not in the streets, but in the silent, vast expanse of space. This story begins not with a dance, but with a single, shocking mark on a piece of paper that would become one of the most iconic artifacts in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. On a quiet summer evening in 1977, a massive radio telescope known as the Big Ear, operated by Ohio State University, was silently listening to the cosmos as it had for years. Its mission was part of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI, program, patiently scanning the sky for any signal that stood out from the natural background radio chatter of the universe. For the most part, the data it collected was a long, uneventful printout of alphanumeric sequences representing the faint hiss of empty space. But on August 15th at 10:16 p.m., something extraordinary happened. The telescope, which was stationary and relied on the Earth's rotation to scan the sky, was focused on a patch of space near the constellation Sagittarius. For exactly 72 seconds, its receivers were flooded with an intense, powerful radio signal. This wasn't just any bit of cosmic noise. It was a strong, focused, narrowband signal, the exact type of signal that theorists had predicted an intelligent civilization would use to broadcast its existence across the galaxy. Natural cosmic objects like stars or quasars produce radio emissions spread across a wide range of frequencies. This signal was concentrated on one specific frequency, 1420 MHz, which is a protected band reserved exclusively for astronomical research. meaning no earthly satellite or aircraft should have been transmitting there. The signal grew to a peak intensity and then faded away as the telescope's field of view moved past it, creating a perfect expected curve on the readout. It was, for all intents and purposes, the signature everyone had been hoping to find. A few days later, a young volunteer astronomer named Jerry Amon was poring over the reams of computer printout from that night's observation. The data was printed in columns of letters and numbers, with signal strength represented by a sequence like a space for nothing, then numbers 1 through 9, and then letters for stronger signals. As his eyes scanned the page, he saw it, a vertical column read out as 6EQUJ5. The U was off the charts. Circling the sequence in red pen, he simply wrote, "Wow." In the margin, that exclamation of stunned discovery gave the signal its now famous name, the WOW signal. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated scientific awe, the kind that every researcher dreams of. It seemed to suggest that we were not alone, that somewhere out there, another intelligence might have just said hello. The immediate and obvious next step was to try and find it again. If this was a genuine beacon from another star system, it should be there, waiting for us to listen once more. And so, for decades, astronomers have pointed some of the world's most powerful radio telescopes, including the Very Large Array in New Mexico, back at that exact same coordinates in Sagittarius. They have scanned that frequency and those around it, listening for a repeat of that electrifying 72-second hello. The result has been a profound and enduring silence. Not a whisper, not a hint. The WOW signal was never heard again. This failure to rediscover the signal is the very heart of the mystery. If it was aliens, why would they transmit just once? A civilization advanced enough to build an interstellar beacon would likely do so continuously, or at least in a repeating pattern, to ensure it was heard. The fact that it hasn't been detected since has forced scientists to vigorously search for other, more mundane explanations. One theory posits that it was a signal reflected off a piece of space debris, like a discarded satellite or rocket body, that briefly bounced a human transmission back towards Earth. However, the 1420 MHz frequency is supposed to be a protected band, making this unlikely, and no known satellites have ever been conclusively matched to the event. Another idea suggests it was a naturally occurring celestial event that we simply don't yet understand, perhaps a completely new type of astrophysical phenomenon that mimics an artificial signal. The most recent and perhaps most plausible terrestrial explanation came in 2020, when some astronomers proposed it was a radio signal from a passing comet. The comets in question, however, were not in the telescope's field of view at the time, and the mechanics of how a comet's hydrogen cloud could generate such a specific, powerful signal have been heavily disputed by other scientists, leaving the theory on very shaky ground. So where does that leave us? The WOW signal endures because it is the ultimate tease. It was a perfect candidate, a signal that matched all the criteria for an artificial interstellar message. It represents that one brilliant flash of possibility, a fleeting moment where the answer to humanity's oldest question, "Are we alone?" seemed to be a resounding yes. Its subsequent disappearance transforms it from a potential discovery into a permanent enigma. It is a ghost in the cosmic machine, a single, enigmatic word spoken into the void that was never repeated. It fuels the debate between optimism and skepticism, reminding us that the universe is vast, strange, and full of phenomena we have yet to explain. The WOW signal is not proof of aliens, but it is perhaps the best piece of evidence that we might not be listening carefully enough, or that the universe still holds wonders beyond our current comprehension. It remains a siren call from the depths of space, a 72-second mystery that continues to echo through the decades. But if the WOW signal was a fleeting whisper from the cosmos, our next event was a deafening, earth-shattering roar, a cataclysm of such raw, terrifying power that it serves as a stark reminder of our planet's vulnerability. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, in the remote, largely uninhabited taiga of Siberia, a man sitting on the front porch of a trading post in Vanavara was witness to an event that would defy comprehension for over a century. He described seeing the sky split in two with a blinding blue light that seemed to cover the entire northern horizon. This was followed by a searing wave of heat that burned his skin and an apocalyptic shockwave that threw him from his chair, shattered windows, and shook the very ground with the force of a major earthquake. This was the Tunguska event, and it remains the most powerful impact event in recorded human history, a colossal explosion that has puzzled scientists ever since. The scale of the devastation was almost unimaginable. Later expeditions to the epicenter, a logistical nightmare undertaken years after the fact, found a landscape of unparalleled destruction. Approximately 2,000 square kilometers of pristine Siberian forest, an area nearly the size of Luxembourg, had been completely flattened. 80 million trees were snapped and thrown down like matchsticks, all radiating outward from a central point in a vast, breathtaking pattern of destruction. At the center of this radial blast zone, a few bizarrely standing telegraph poles remained, stripped of their branches and bark, a haunting testament to the force of the vertical blast wave. Yet, for all this evidence of an impact of cosmic proportions, the most baffling clue was what was missing: a crater. There was no smoking gun, no giant hole in the ground that one would expect from an object capable of unleashing such incredible energy. This absence of a crater is the central, enduring mystery of Tunguska. So, what exactly happened? The prevailing scientific consensus points to the airburst of a relatively small stony asteroid or a fragment of a comet, measuring perhaps only 50 to 60 meters across, roughly the size of a large office building. Traveling at hypersonic speeds of over 30,000 miles per hour, the immense pressure of entering Earth's atmosphere would have caused the object to heat up and violently explode in mid-air, somewhere between 5 and 10 kilometers above the ground. The energy released is estimated to have been between 10 and 15 megatons of TNT, making it nearly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. This explains the radial forest destruction and the lack of a crater. The object vaporized completely in the atmosphere, its energy translating into a devastating blast wave that hammered the Earth below without ever making physical contact. Witnesses hundreds of kilometers away reported hearing a series of massive booms, consistent with the sound of a supersonic object breaking apart. However, the lack of any significant fragments or definitive impact site has kept the door open for more exotic theories over the decades. In the absence of immediate scientific investigation, the first proper expedition didn't reach the remote site until 1927, nearly 20 years later. Wild speculation flourished. Some early investigators, finding no meteoritic material, proposed a massive eruption of natural gas from the ground. Others, noting strange patterns of growth in the local vegetation, wondered about a localized nuclear explosion, a theory that was, of course, impossible for the time. More fringe ideas have included the annihilation of a small black hole passing through the Earth, or the crash of a stranded extraterrestrial spacecraft with a malfunctioning power core. These sci-fi scenarios, while captivating, are dismissed by the overwhelming scientific evidence supporting the airburst hypothesis. The real, lingering debate among experts isn't about aliens, but about the precise nature of the impactor itself. Was it a rocky asteroid or an icy comet? This distinction is crucial for understanding the frequency of such events and assessing future risks. A comet composed of ice and dust would behave differently in the atmosphere and could explain the lack of any sizable remnants. It would also likely have been traveling much faster, increasing the energy of the explosion. The event's timing coincides with the Beta Taurid meteor shower, which is associated with Comet in Care, lending some credence to the cometary theory. On the other hand, modern computer models and studies of the blast pattern increasingly suggest a stony asteroid that exploded with such force that it left behind only microscopic traces of itself, which have been found embedded in the resin of trees from the area. This leads to the final, sobering point of the Tunguska mystery, its terrifying rarity and its profound implications. An event of this magnitude is estimated to occur only once every few hundred years. Yet, if such an airburst were to happen today over a densely populated metropolitan area, the results would be catastrophic, leveling an entire city and causing millions of casualties. Tunguska stands as a permanent warning shot across our bow, a demonstration of the destructive power that resides in the seemingly empty space around our planet. It forced us to look up and acknowledge the threat, ultimately leading to the development of programs like NAS, a Planetary Defense Coordination Office, which actively scans the skies for potentially hazardous near-Earth objects. The mystery of Tunguska, therefore, is not just about identifying a culprit from a century ago. It's about solving a puzzle that holds the key to protecting our entire civilization in the future. It was a single, violent moment that reminded us we are still part of a dynamic and sometimes dangerous solar system. From the frozen Siberian wilderness, we journey now to a place of sun-drenched mystery, a region that has captivated and terrified the public imagination like no other, the Bermuda Triangle. This loosely defined area in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean, with vertices at Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has been the subject of countless books, documentaries, and sensational headlines, all painting it as a supernatural vortex where ships and planes vanish without a trace. The legend suggests a place where compasses spin wildly, electronic equipment fails, and vessels are swallowed by an unknown force, leaving behind no debris, no distress calls, and no survivors. It's a compelling narrative, a modern-day mythos of a treacherous patch of sea that defies all explanation. But when we pull back the curtain of legend and examine the cold, hard facts, a very different and arguably more fascinating story emerges. The modern myth of the Bermuda Triangle was largely born from a single, tragic incident that occurred in the calm, clear weather of December 5, 1945. Flight 19, a routine training mission of 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, took off from the Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station with 14 experienced crewmen aboard. Led by instructor Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight was scheduled for a simple navigational exercise, but something went terribly wrong. Radio transmissions revealed that Taylor's compasses had malfunctioned. Believing he was over the Florida Keys, he was actually hundreds of miles out to sea. His transmissions grew increasingly panicked as he described being lost in white water and stated, "We can't be sure of any direction. Everything is wrong, even the ocean doesn't look as it should." Despite clear skies and radio contact, neither Taylor nor the rescue plane sent to find them, a PBM Mariner with 13 more souls, were ever seen again. The official Navy report could only conclude the cause was unknown, a phrase that would become the foundation for 1,000 theories. This single event became the cornerstone of the Triangle's fearsome reputation, but it's a reputation built on a shaky foundation of selective reporting and outright fiction. Author Vincent Gaddis is widely credited with coining the term Bermuda Triangle in a 1964 magazine article, and subsequent authors like Charles Berlitz in his 1974 bestseller sensationalized the stories, often omitting key facts that provided logical explanations. For instance, the Avengers of Flight 19 were not flying in ideal conditions as often reported. Sea states were rough and night was falling quickly. Lieutenant Taylor was an experienced but sometimes reckless pilot who had previously needed to be rescued from the sea after getting lost. Most tellingly, the rescue Mariner plane did not vanish mysteriously. It was seen exploding in mid-air shortly after takeoff, a common occurrence for an aircraft known to its crews as a flying gas tank due to its flammable fuel vapors. When we examine the statistics, the mystery evaporates further. The area known as the Bermuda Triangle is one of the most heavily traveled shipping lanes and flight paths in the world. The US Coast Guard and Lloyd's of London, the world's leading insurer of marine vessels, have both stated unequivocally that the number of ships and aircraft reported missing in the triangle is no greater than in any other similarly trafficked part of the ocean. The vast majority of incidents have very straightforward, if tragic, explanations. The region is prone to suddenly violent and unpredictable weather. The Gulf Stream flows directly through it, a powerful, swift, and turbulent current that can quickly erase any evidence of a disaster. The ocean floor here plummets to some of the greatest depths on Earth, making the recovery of wreckage nearly impossible and allowing for the rapid dispersal of any debris. Many of the more exotic theories proposed for the disappearances actually have scientific basis, though they are often misrepresented. One of the most popular is the sudden release of methane hydrates from the seafloor. The theory suggests that large bubbles of methane gas could erupt from deposits under the seabed, rising to the surface and drastically reducing the water's density. A ship caught in such a bubble would lose its buoyancy and sink almost instantly. While this is a geologically plausible phenomenon, there is no evidence that such a large-scale event has occurred in the triangle within human history. Similarly, theories about magnetic anomalies causing compass problems are overstated. While the triangle is one of the few places where true north and magnetic north align, this simply means compasses don't need adjustment here. It doesn't cause them to malfunction. The true danger in the Bermuda Triangle isn't a supernatural force, it's a combination of natural hazards and human fallibility. The weather can turn deadly in an instant with the formation of rogue waves, massive walls of water that can appear without warning and overwhelm even large vessels. The powerful Gulf Stream can carry debris far from the original site of an accident within hours, and human error, as was likely the case with the disoriented Lieutenant Taylor, remains the single greatest factor in maritime and aviation disasters worldwide. The enduring power of the Bermuda Triangle myth speaks less to any strange power it holds and more to a deep human need for mystery. We are drawn to the idea that there are still dark corners of the map where the normal rules don't apply. It's a story we want to believe because it adds a layer of thrilling, terrifying wonder to our well-charted world. But the reality is that the ocean is an inherently dangerous place, and tragedy needs no supernatural help to occur. The real mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is not why things disappear, but why we are so determined to believe in the magic when the truth is compelling enough. While the Bermuda Triangle myth taps into our fear of the unknown in nature, our next mystery is a descent into the deliberate, calculated unknown of the human mind, a story not of a place but of a person who weaponized mystery itself. In the late 1960s, the San Francisco Bay Area was gripped by a fear far more personal and intimate than any force of nature. A shadowy figure who called himself the Zodiac Killer began a campaign of terror, targeting young couples in isolated lovers' lanes and later lone individuals. The violence was horrific, but it was what the killer did afterwards that cemented his place in history and created one of the most enduring puzzles in the annals of true crime. He didn't just kill, he communicated. He sent a series of taunting letters and cards to local Bay Area newspapers, each one dripping with a vile, gloating arrogance. These weren't just confessions, they were performances, and embedded within them were complex ciphers, coded messages that he promised would reveal his identity. He was not just a murderer, he was a cryptographer playing a deadly game with the entire world, and to this day he remains the one still holding most of the cards. The Zodiac's first 2 ciphers arrived in pieces to 3 different newspapers in August 1969, just a month after his first 2 confirmed attacks. He demanded they be printed on the front page, threatening to go on a killing spree if they were not. The 408-symbol cipher, now known as the 408 cipher, was cracked in just a few days by a remarkably talented amateur couple, Donald and Betty Harden. Its solution revealed the killer's twisted motive. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." It was a chilling glimpse into a psyche devoid of empathy, viewing human beings as mere prey. But the cipher also contained a haunting declaration. The killer claimed he would not reveal his identity until he was certain he would be caught, a promise that has tormented investigators for decades. Emboldened by the attention, the Zodiac sent another cipher in November of that year. This one, known as the 340 cipher for its 340 characters, was a far more complex puzzle. For over 50 years, it stood unbroken, a silent monument to the killer's cunning, resisting the efforts of the world's top codebreakers at the National Security Agency, the FBI, and countless brilliant amateur sleuths around the globe. The breakthrough finally came in December 2020 due to a coordinated effort by a team of 3 private citizens: David Oranchak, a software developer, Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian codebreaker, and Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician. They used modern computing power and a meticulous process of elimination to crack the code, a moment of immense triumph for the code-breaking community. Yet the solution was deeply anticlimactic. Rather than a name or a location, the decrypted message was another rant filled with the Zodiac's familiar narcissism and misspelled threats. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me." This victory, while significant, only deepened the central mystery. It proved the Zodiac ciphers were not merely gibberish designed to waste time. They were genuine, solvable puzzles, but it also revealed that his ultimate goal may not have been to reveal himself, but rather to assert his intellectual superiority and to control the narrative, keeping the media and the police dancing to his tune long after his murders had stopped. The decryption of the 340 cipher was a key that unlocked a door, only to find another empty room behind it, and most frustratingly, it is not the only one. Other communications, like the tantalizing 13-character Zodiac signature and the mysterious 32-character cipher on the back of a Halloween card, remain completely unsolved, their secrets still locked away, potentially holding the final pieces of the puzzle. The enduring fascination with the Zodiac ciphers lies in this dual nature. On one hand, it is a dark historical true crime story. On the other, it is the world's most macabre and persistent puzzle box, an open challenge to anyone with a sharp mind. The case has generated a sprawling community of amateur detectives and cryptographers who pore over every clue, every suspect, and every line of the unsolved codes, hoping to be the one to finally unmask the monster. They operate in a digital age the Zodiac himself could never have imagined, using tools and global collaboration he never anticipated. The suspects have been numerous over the years, from a school teacher named Arthur Lee Allen, who was investigated intensely but never charged, to more recent DNA-led possibilities. Yet no accusation has ever stuck with enough certainty to close the case officially. The legacy of the Zodiac is therefore a paradox. He is both a concrete historical figure who committed very real, tragic murders, and a ghost, an idea made of symbols and letters. He turned his own identity into his final, unsolved cipher. The investigation continues not because of new evidence, but because the old evidence, those cryptic messages, still feels like a conversation that hasn't ended. Each unsolved card and letter is a direct line to a moment in time, a deliberate creation by a killer who wanted more than anything to be remembered as an enigmatic genius rather than a common criminal. He succeeded in that goal, crafting a mystery so compelling that we are still trying to solve it, ensuring that his voice, however twisted, continues to echo across the decades. While the Zodiac Killer represents a modern mystery of human malice, Our next event takes us back to a far older and more isolated enigma, the complete and utter disappearance of a European society that had clung to the edge of the known world for centuries. Far to the north, on the rugged coast of Greenland, the Norse established two thriving settlements toward the end of the 10th century. These were not outposts of a few hardy explorers. They were full-fledged communities with perhaps as many as 5,000 people at their peak, complete with churches, monasteries, a cathedral, and hundreds of farms raising cattle, sheep, and goats. They traded valuable exports like walrus ivory, hides, and live polar bears with Norway and the rest of Europe for 500 years, and then by the middle of the 15th century they were gone. Not a single Norse Greenlander remained. The silence that followed is one of history's most profound mysteries, the story of a lost colony that didn't vanish overnight like Roanoke, but rather faded away slowly, leaving behind only ruins and unanswered questions. So what happened to these Vikings of the Arctic? The most compelling theory points directly to a shifting climate. The Norse had arrived during the medieval warm period, a centuries-long era of unusually mild temperatures that allowed them to establish a European-style pastoral economy in a harsh land. Greenland, as its name suggests, was somewhat greener and more hospitable then, but by the 1300s the climate began to dramatically cool, ushering in the Little Ice Age. Summers grew shorter and colder, winters longer and more severe. This had a catastrophic effect on their way of life. The growing season for barley and hay became too short to reliably feed their livestock through the long winters. Sea ice expanded, blocking crucial trade routes to Iceland and Norway for longer periods, isolating the settlements and cutting off their economic lifeline. Archaeological evidence shows that the Norse were suffering from malnutrition in their final decades. Their bones show signs of starvation and disease. It seems a slow-motion catastrophe, a people gradually starving and freezing in their own homes as the world around them grew colder. Yet climate change alone may not tell the whole story. The Norse were not alone in Greenland. They shared the island with the Thule people, the ancestors of the modern Inuit, who began migrating into the region from the north around the 1200s. The two cultures could not have been more different. The Norse were tied to their farms, their livestock, and their European identity. The Inuit were nomadic hunters, supremely adapted to the Arctic environment, masters of hunting seal and whale from kayaks and umiaks. For a long time, they seem to have coexisted with some evidence of trade. But as resources grew scarcer during the Little Ice Age, competition likely turned to conflict. The Norse sagas tell of skirmishes with a people they called the Skraelings. Did the Inuit, better equipped and better nourished, eventually overrun the weakened Norse settlements? While there is no archaeological evidence of a mass slaughter, a series of smaller, devastating raids could have been the final blow that broke a society already on the brink of collapse. Another layer to the mystery is the Greenlanders' own puzzling inflexibility. The archaeological record reveals a society that clung tenaciously to its European identity, even when it became a fatal liability. They continued to wear woolen clothing suited for a Scandinavian summer, rather than adopting the superior sealskin and caribou furs of the Inuit. Their dairy cattle, a powerful status symbol in Norse culture, required enormous amounts of stored hay to survive the winter, a nearly impossible task as the climate worsened. They focused their hunting on the prized walrus for its ivory tusks, a luxury trade good for Europe, while largely ignoring the richer, more reliable food sources of seal and whale that sustained the Inuit. This cultural conservatism is both understandable and baffling. Were they so proud, so isolated, that they failed to learn from their neighbors who were clearly thriving in the same environment? It is a tragic story of a people who may have been defeated as much by their own traditions as by the ice. With all these pressures mounting, the final fate of the last Norse Greenlanders remains unknown. Did they simply die out where they stood, the last survivors succumbing to hunger and cold in their lonely stone longhouses? Did they attempt a desperate mass exodus back to Iceland or Norway only to be lost at sea? Or is the answer more complex? Some intriguing evidence suggests a few may have assimilated with the Inuit, adopting a new way of life to survive. A later Icelandic account describes a ship that landed in Greenland in the 1540s and encountered a dead man wearing a hood and woolen clothing, who was clearly European, lying on the ground beside a scabbard for a knife, a final, lonely testament to the end of a world. The lost colony of Greenland stands as a haunting lesson in societal collapse. It wasn't one single disaster, but a perfect storm of environmental change, economic irrelevance, cultural stubbornness, and perhaps external conflict. It is the story of a people who carved a life out of the Arctic for half a millennium, only to vanish so completely that we can only piece together their end from the silent stones they left behind. But if the Norse of Greenland vanished under the slow, crushing weight of environmental change, our next mystery is a single, tangible object that has defied understanding since the moment it was unearthed. It is a small, fired clay disc roughly the size of a standard dinner plate, and it is one of the most captivating and frustrating puzzles ever placed in the hands of archaeologists. Discovered in 1908 within the ancient Minoan palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete, the Phaistos disc dates back to the Middle or Late Minoan Bronze Age, sometime in the 2nd millennium BC. Its significance, however, is enormous, completely out of proportion to its modest size. Both sides of the disc are covered in a continuous spiral of strange, intricate symbols, each one not hand-painted or carved, but neatly stamped into the soft clay with individual seals before it was fired. This single fact makes the disc astonishingly unique. It is perhaps the earliest example of movable type printing in human history, a technology that wouldn't appear again for another 3,000 years. And to this day, not a single one of its 241 symbols has been definitively deciphered. The symbols themselves are a mesmerizing gallery of human and animal figures, plants, tools, and abstract shapes. We see a helmeted head, a walking man, a woman exposing her breasts, a child, a captive with his arms bound behind his back. There are animals like birds, fish, insects, and a cat's head. There are objects like a ship, an axe, a shield, and what looks like a carpenter's saw. These 45 distinct signs are arranged in groups, separated by incised vertical lines, suggesting they form individual words or phrases marching along the spiral path. The entire text seems to tell a story, but it is a story written in a language that is completely unknown and using a script that appears nowhere else on Earth. No other artifact bearing these symbols has ever been found, making the disc a hapax legomenon, a one-of-a-kind inscription that cannot be compared to anything else. It is a linguistic island utterly isolated, with no bridge to connect it to the mainland of any known language. This profound isolation is the heart of the mystery. Without a bilingual text, a Rosetta Stone for the Minoan world, or even a longer corpus of similar inscriptions, decipherment efforts have been largely speculative and universally unsuccessful. Over the past century, would-be decipherers have proposed that the disc contains everything from a hymn to a mother goddess, and a geometric theorem to a list of soldiers or a narrative of a heroic journey. Some of the most compelling theories suggest it is not a written language at all, but a form of symbolic notation. Could it be a board game with the spiral representing a path and the symbols indicating moves or challenges? The layout certainly supports this idea, but no game pieces have ever been found with it. Another theory posits that it was a magical or religious object, a kind of prayer wheel or a template for casting spells, its symbols meant to be read aloud to invoke divine power or protection. The very method of its creation adds another layer of intrigue. The use of pre-formed punches to stamp the symbols implies the existence of a whole set of such seals, a sophisticated technology for mass-producing text. This suggests the script on the disc was not a one-off creation but part of a broader, established system of writing, So where are all the other stamped texts? Why have we found nothing else like it? This leads to another disturbing possibility, that the disc is a modern forgery, planted at the Faisto site to deceive its Italian excavator, Luigi Pernia. While most scholars dismiss this due to the context of its discovery and advanced age confirmed by thermoluminescence dating, the theory persists precisely because the object is so utterly anomalous. It is as if a single CDROM was discovered in a medieval monastery, a clear example of advanced technology that seems to belong to a different time and place entirely. The Faisto's disc, therefore, is more than an undeciphered text. It is a profound question about the nature of innovation and loss in the ancient world. It hints at a brief, brilliant flash of technological creativity in the Minoan civilization that was either not adopted, was used on perishable materials that did not survive, or was a dead end that was abandoned as quickly as it was invented. It stands alone in the archaeological record, a silent, stubborn testament to the fact that history is not a simple, linear progression. Some ideas appear, shine for a fleeting moment, and then vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a single, perfect artifact to puzzle and inspire future generations. It is a message from the past that we can see but cannot read, a beautiful and maddening reminder of how much we still have to learn about the ingenious minds that came before us. Yet another artifact that challenges our timeline of innovation comes not from the sea or a frozen tomb, but from the dusty soil of ancient Mesopotamia. In 1936, workers excavating a 2,000-year-old Parthian site just outside Baghdad, Iraq, unearthed a collection of rather unassuming objects that would later ignite a firestorm of controversy. The find consisted of a small, 13-centimeter long clay jar, inside of which was a rolled copper sheet forming a cylinder, sealed at the bottom with a disc of copper. Suspended inside this cylinder, but not touching it, was an iron rod. The whole assembly was held in place with an asphalt or bitumen plug, which also acted as a stopper for the jar. To the untrained eye, it looked like a rather odd sealed container, but to Wilhelm Koenig, the German director of the National Museum of Iraq, who either discovered or later studied them, it looked like something else entirely, an ancient electric cell. The theory is as ingenious as it is startling. If the jar were to be filled with an acidic liquid such as vinegar or grape juice, the electrolyte would interact with the two different metals, the copper cylinder and the iron rod, creating a chemical reaction. This reaction would cause electrons to flow from the iron to the copper through the acidic solution, generating a small electrical charge, likely around 1 volt of electricity. Several of these cells connected together in a series could have produced a significantly higher voltage. This simple device, now famously known as the Baghdad battery, suggests that someone in the ancient Middle East, nearly 2 millennia before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in 1800, may have stumbled upon the basic principles of electrochemistry. But if this interpretation is correct, what on earth would they have used it for? The most popular and practical theory is electroplating, the process of using an electric current to coat a common metal with a thin layer of a more precious one, like gold or silver. Artisans of the time were skilled at gliding objects using mercury, a toxic and dangerous process. A simple electrical cell could have provided a much safer and more controlled method for depositing a fine layer of gold onto silver or copper artifacts. This would explain the existence of incredibly fine, microscopically thin gliding on some Parthian and later Sasanian metalwork, gliding that has puzzled experts because it seems too precise and uniform to have been achieved with mercury alone. The idea that ancient craftsmen could have used a form of primitive battery to electroplate jewelry or religious icons is a revolutionary concept that would rewrite a key chapter in the history of technology. Not everyone, however, is convinced by this electrifying hypothesis. Skeptics, including many mainstream archaeologists, offer a much more mundane explanation. The so-called battery was simply a sealed storage container for important scrolls. In this view, the iron rod was merely a convenient stick around which a valuable papyrus or parchment scroll could be rolled for safekeeping. The copper cylinder would have protected the scroll from pests and the elements, and the asphalt seal would have made the vessel airtight and waterproof, preserving its contents in the dry Iraqi climate. They point out that if the jar was meant to hold a liquid electrolyte, the asphalt seal would have corroded over time, yet the seals on the recovered objects are intact. Furthermore, no wires or connectors have ever been found with these jars to suggest they were linked together to form a more powerful battery bank. A third, more esoteric theory moves away from the practical and into the realm of the spiritual. Some researchers have proposed the device could have been used for religious or magical purposes. The mild electric shock produced by the cell, though not powerful enough for practical work, would have been a strange and tingling sensation on the skin. In the hands of a knowledgeable priest, this could have been a powerful tool for mystification, a way to make a statue of a god seem to vibrate with divine energy, or to give a worshipper a physical jolt during a ritual, interpreted as the touch of a deity. In a world where magic and religion were intertwined with daily life, a device that could produce a seemingly spontaneous physical phenomenon would have been incredibly valuable, its true workings a closely guarded secret of the temple. The debate over the Baghdad battery's true purpose remains unresolved because the evidence is so tantalizingly ambiguous. We have the physical components that align perfectly with a basic galvanic cell, yet we lack any definitive proof of its application, like wires or electroplated objects found in direct association with the jars. The mystery endures precisely because both sides of the argument are compelling. It is entirely plausible that it was a simple storage jar, its metallic contents coincidentally resembling a battery. Yet, it is equally plausible that it represents a brilliant, isolated spark of proto-scientific discovery, a technology that was either lost, remained a trade secret of a small guild of artisans, or was simply never widely adopted. The Baghdad battery forces us to confront a fascinating possibility that ancient civilizations may have discovered profound scientific principles through empirical experimentation, long before those discoveries were formally credited to the great minds of the Enlightenment. It is a humble clay pot that holds not a scroll, but a charge of dramatic potential, challenging us to wonder just how much knowledge has been lost to the silence of the past. While the Baghdad battery presents a quiet enigma of ancient technology, our next mystery is a saga of sheer, obsessive effort, a hole in the ground that has consumed fortunes and lifetimes in a quest for a treasure that may not even exist. Just off the rugged coast of Nova Scotia lies Oak Island, a relatively small and unassuming patch of land that has been the stage for one of the world's longest and most expensive treasure hunts. The legend begins in 1795, when a young man named Daniel Magines spotted strange lights on the island and discovered a peculiar circular depression in the ground. Above it hung an old ship's pulley from a sawed-off tree limb, suggesting he wasn't the first to find the spot. Driven by tales of pirate gold, Magines and two friends began to dig, and what they found would ignite a frenzy that continues to this day. They hit a layer of flagstones just a few feet down, and then every 10 feet they encountered a daunting obstacle, a platform of sturdy oak logs firmly set into the walls of the shaft. This was no natural formation. It was a complex, deeply buried structure that became known as the Money Pit. As the decades turned into centuries, the excavations grew more ambitious and the theories more elaborate. In the early 1800s, a company known as the Onslow Company took over the dig, reaching deeper than anyone before. At around 90 feet, they made a discovery that would become the cornerstone of the entire legend, a large, flat stone inscribed with mysterious symbols. Though the stone itself was later lost, a transcription was made, and it was eventually interpreted to read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. This wasn't just a hole, it was an engineered puzzle with a promised reward. Even more tantalizing, just below this stone, probes allegedly struck a massive chest before the tunnel suddenly flooded with seawater, forcing the diggers to retreat. This flooding was no accident. It appeared to be the work of a brilliantly designed booby trap. As crews tried to dig new shafts to bypass the water, the original money pit would flood again, as if the entire system was connected to the ocean by a series of intricate, man-made flood tunnels. The sheer complexity of the engineering suggested that whatever was buried down there was valuable enough to protect with a system far ahead of its time. So, who could have built such an elaborate vault, and what could possibly be inside? The theories are as vast as the excavations themselves. The most enduring tale points to Captain William Kidd, or the infamous pirate Blackbeard, who supposedly buried their vast plunder in a location so ingeniously protected that no one could ever retrieve it. Another compelling theory connects the pit to the lost treasures of the Spanish fleet, or even to British forces during the American Revolution, who may have hidden the colonial payroll to keep it from falling into rebel hands. But the most grandiose theory of all involves the Knights Templar. Proponents of this idea suggest that the treasure is not mere gold, but something of immense religious significance, such as the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant. The theory posits that after the Templars were persecuted in the 14th century, fleeing knights transported their sacred relics across the ocean, using their advanced architectural knowledge to construct the ultimate hiding place on Oak Island. This idea, while lacking in concrete historical evidence, speaks to the human desire for a mystery that is not just about wealth, but about rewriting history itself. Despite over 2 centuries of digging, drilling, and draining, involving everything from simple shovels to massive modern caissons, the island has yielded only a handful of curious artifacts, a few links of gold chain, a parchment scrap, a primitive cipher stone, and various ancient tools. The lack of definitive evidence has led many experts to a much more mundane, yet equally fascinating conclusion that the money pit is not man-made at all, but an entirely natural phenomenon. Geologists point out that the island is primarily made of limestone, a rock highly susceptible to dissolving and creating karst formations, including deep sinkholes and natural cavities. The frequent flooding could easily be explained by the tidal pressures of the surrounding ocean, forcing water through these porous, natural channels. The oak platforms found at regular intervals might not be the floors of a shaft, but rather ancient layers of driftwood and debris that accumulated in a sinkhole over thousands of years, compacted and hardened by time. In this view, the entire treasure hunt is a spectacular example of the psychological phenomenon known as apophenia, the human tendency to see patterns and intentional design in random, natural events. Every log and stone becomes part of a master plan because we are desperate for it to be one. The enduring power of the Oak Island mystery lies in this very conflict between the desire for a grand historical narrative and the stubbornness of geological fact. It is a story that has been fueled by generations of treasure hunters, each new group armed with more advanced technology and even greater determination than the last. The modern saga, popularized by the History Channel television series The Curse of Oak Island, has brought in millions of dollars and an army of enthusiasts, yet the core mystery remains stubbornly intact. Each new season promises a breakthrough, a tantalizing clue that seems to point toward one of the grand theories, only to end with another season of inconclusive results and mounting costs. This cycle of hope and frustration is the true treasure of Oak Island. It is not a chest of gold, but the timeless human drive to explore, to solve, and to believe that just beyond our reach lies a secret that will change everything. The island is a monument to obsession, a physical manifestation of the question, what would you sacrifice for the chance to find out what's really at the bottom of the hole? Moving from the sunken treasures and earthly obsessions of Oak Island, we now turn to an object that inspires not a quest for gold, but a search for something far more profound, divine truth. Housed in the royal chapel of the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, is a piece of linen that may be the most intensely studied and passionately debated artifact in human history. Measuring approximately 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide, the Shroud of Turin bears the faint, sepia-toned image of a man who appears to have been crucified. The figure shows all the wounds consistent with the biblical accounts of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Scourge marks across the back and legs, a puncture in the wrist consistent with a nail, wounds around the head that could be from a crown of thorns, and a lance wound to the right side of the chest. For millions of the faithful, this is not merely an ancient cloth. It is the very burial shroud of Christ, a sacred relic that offers tangible proof of the resurrection. For skeptics and scientists, it is a medieval forgery, an ingenious but ultimately human creation. And for everyone who has studied it, it remains an enigma that defies simple explanation, a puzzle where faith and science collide with extraordinary force. The modern scientific investigation of the shroud began in earnest in 1978 with the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP. A team of American scientists and researchers was granted unprecedented access to the cloth for 120 hours of continuous around-the-clock testing. They employed the most advanced technology of the day, including ultraviolet photography, X-ray fluorescence, and microchemical analysis, all performed on site without ever cutting or damaging the relic. What they discovered only deepened the mystery. They confirmed that the image is not painted. There are no pigments, no dyes, and no brushstrokes. The coloration exists only on the very topmost fibrils of the linen threads. It does not penetrate the cloth. It has the characteristics of a scorch, as if the fibers had been altered by a brief, intense burst of energy, but without any signs of charring or destruction. Furthermore, they found that the image possesses three-dimensional information encoded within it. When analyzed with a VP8 image analyzer, a device developed for the NASA Viking space missions to interpret the topography of planetary surfaces, the shroud's image yielded a perfect three-dimensional relief of a human body, a property no known painting or drawing can replicate. This finding suggests the image was formed by a direct, distance-based interaction between the body and the cloth, not by contact with an artist's hand. Perhaps the most shocking finding, however, came from the faint bloodstains also present on the cloth. The STURP team identified the presence of human blood, specifically type AB, and made another startling observation. The bloodstains had soaked into the linen fibers before the image was formed. This sequence is critical. A forger would have had to first apply real human blood to the cloth in anatomically perfect detail, and then somehow superimpose the body image over it without disturbing the blood, a near impossible feat for a medieval artisan. The blood also shows a high content of bilirubin, a compound that increases in the body under extreme stress and torture, which is consistent with the trauma of a crucifixion. These findings seem to point toward the shroud's authenticity, creating a compelling narrative that science was confirming ancient belief. Then, in 1988, came the event that seemed to settle the debate once and for all, only to open new controversies. With the permission of the Vatican, a small sample from a corner of the shroud was carefully cut and divided among three prestigious laboratories at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Using accelerator mass spectrometry, they performed radiocarbon dating on the linen fibers. The results, published in the journal Nature, were unequivocal. The cloth dated from between 1260 and 1390 with a 95% confidence level. To the scientific community, this was a definitive verdict. The Shroud of Turin was a medieval creation, an artifact from the very period when the veneration of religious relics and the production of forgeries to meet that demand were at their peak in Europe. The case, it appeared, was closed, but the story did not end there. Almost immediately, critics of the carbon dating raised serious objections. They argued that the sample chosen for testing was taken from a corner of the shroud that had been handled, mended, and potentially contaminated over centuries. This area, they claimed, was not representative of the main cloth. It could have been a patch expertly rewoven into the original fabric by medieval nuns, a common practice for repairing precious relics. Furthermore, a fire in 1532 had severely damaged the shroud while it was kept in a silver casket in Chambéry, France. The intense heat melted part of the casket, burning holes through the folded cloth and dousing it in water used to extinguish the blaze. Critics suggest this event could have introduced carbon contaminants from the fire's smoke and the water's minerals, as well as facilitating the growth of microbes and fungi on the linen. These modern carbon-based contaminants, they argue, would have skewed the radiocarbon dating results, making the shroud appear centuries younger than it actually is. While attempts to replicate this kind of contamination have produced mixed results, the questions remain, leaving a permanent cloud of doubt over the 1988 study. This scientific stalemate has given rise to alternative theories that attempt to explain the shroud without requiring a divine miracle, yet still acknowledge its bizarre and unique properties. The most prominent of these is the artistic theory. Could a medieval forger have possessed knowledge and techniques far beyond what we assume? Some researchers propose a form of early photography, using a camera obscura and light-sensitive silver compounds to project an image onto the cloth. Others suggest a primitive form of rubbing or bas-relief, where a cloth was placed over a stone statue of a crucified man that had been coated with a chemical agent and then heated to transfer the image. While these theories are creatively ingenious, they all struggle to account for the shroud's most perplexing features: the perfect anatomical and pathological accuracy of the wounds, the three-dimensional information encoded in the image, and the fact that the coloration exists on only the uppermost fibers without any directionality or brushstrokes. No medieval artist, no matter how skilled, could have known the precise physiological details of Roman crucifixion methods that modern forensic pathologists have confirmed are correct, details that were completely lost to history by the Middle Ages. The Shroud of Turin, therefore, exists in a category of its own. It is an artifact that simultaneously presents evidence for both a miraculous origin and a medieval creation, a paradox that satisfies neither the devout nor the skeptical completely. For every scientific test that seems to prove its authenticity, another seems to disprove it. It is a mirror reflecting our own beliefs back at us. Perhaps its greatest power is not in providing an answer, but in holding a question open for centuries. It challenges the boundaries between faith and reason, between artifact and icon, forcing a continuous and fascinating dialogue. It remains an unresolved testament to a profound human mystery, a silent witness to an event that continues to shape the world, its true story still woven into the very fibers we have yet to fully understand. But as we consider the sacred mystery of the shroud, we now turn to a very different kind of relic, one that speaks not of faith but of fortune. Among the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, those ancient Jewish texts discovered in caves near Qumran, one stands utterly apart. It is not made of fragile parchment or papyrus, but of a far more durable and unusual material, metal. Known as the Copper Scroll, it was found in 1952 in Cave 3, and it presented an immediate and thrilling challenge. Unlike its companions, which contain biblical scriptures and religious commentaries, this document is written in a different form of Hebrew and appears to be something entirely secular, a detailed inventory of hidden treasure. The problem, the immense fortune it describes, has never been found, and the cryptic instructions for locating it have baffled explorers and scholars for over 70 years. The scroll's physical nature is the first clue to its mystery. Crafted from nearly pure copper, a costly and difficult material to inscribe upon, it was clearly made to last. The choice of metal itself suggests the immense importance of its message, meant to survive the ages when papyrus would have crumbled to dust. Because copper is so brittle, the scroll was found in two separate rolled-up pieces, and it had to be carefully cut open into strips by a Manchester University professor using a special saw, a painstaking process that took the entire year of 1955. The text, once revealed, was not a spiritual guide but a practical list. It meticulously details 64 different hiding places, complete with specific measurements and landmarks, where staggering quantities of gold and silver are supposedly buried. The sums are almost unbelievable, described in talents, a unit of weight meaning the listed treasures would amount to many tons of precious metal. We're talking about a haul worth billions in today's currency, a fortune that would rewrite the history of the region. This is where the real puzzle begins. If such a monumental treasure existed, who hid it, and why has no one ever recovered even a single bar of silver from the lists? The most widely accepted theory points to the tumultuous period of the Jewish-Roman Wars, specifically the First Jewish Revolt that ended with the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the year 70. It's plausible that priests, foreseeing the Roman siege, systematically emptied the temple's vast treasury and hid its contents in the Judean wilderness to protect it from pillaging legions. The copper scroll, then, would be a kind of ancient security document, a hard-backed ledger meant to survive so that the sacred wealth could one day be recovered. The descriptions of hiding places, caves, tombs, aqueducts, and specific valleys all align with the geography around Qumran and Jerusalem. Expeditions have been mounted for decades, armed with the scroll's clues, using everything from shovels to ground-penetrating radar. They have dug at the base of certain ruins, scanned specific cisterns, and followed the described measurements to the letter. Yet, without exception, every single search has come up empty. Not one of the 64 caches has yielded a single coin. This consistent failure has led many experts to a fascinating and alternative conclusion, that the treasure was never meant to be physical. Perhaps the scroll is not a literal map, but a symbolic or spiritual one. Some scholars argue the immense quantities of gold and silver are simply too vast to be real. They are mythological, representing spiritual wealth or the symbolic treasures of a lost temple that existed in theology rather than in a vault. The listings could be a work of folklore or a religious allegory, a way for a community in exile to hold onto the idea of their sacred wealth even after it was physically gone. Another compelling theory suggests the treasure was indeed real, but it was found and looted long ago, most likely by the Romans themselves. After crushing the revolt, the Romans were notoriously thorough in their searches for plunder and in torturing prisoners for information. It is entirely possible they extracted the locations from captured rebels and systematically stripped the land of every last ingot, leaving the copper scroll as a haunting ghost of a fortune that vanished 2,000 years ago. The copper scroll endures as a unique enigma because it so perfectly blends the tantalizing possibility of immense riches with an intellectual lock that no one has been able to pick. It is a tangible object that points to something that may be entirely intangible. It represents the ultimate treasure hunt, a real-world puzzle with an X that marks a spot we may never find. It challenges our desire for a straightforward historical narrative, forcing us to ask, is this a map to a literal lost fortune, or is it a map to the hopes and fears of a people facing annihilation? The copper has survived, its message clear, but the true meaning of that message and the fate of the treasure it guards remains one of history's most captivating and unresolved secrets. Yet the sheer scale of the Karnak alignments pushes even the most practical theories to their limits. Could a society we perceive as primitive really have organized the quarrying, transportation, and precise erection of thousands of multi-ton stones simply to mark territory or display status? The immense labor and coordination required suggest a motivation far deeper than a simple land claim. This has led many researchers down a more celestial path, proposing that the stones functioned as a sophisticated astronomical observatory or calendar. Certain rows appear to be aligned with the rising and setting points of the sun and moon during the solstices and equinoxes. The grand menhir brissae, now fallen and broken but once the largest standing stone in Europe, located just north of the main alignments, may have served as a central foresight for such observations, allowing Neolithic people to accurately track the passing seasons and predict celestial events critical to their agricultural and ritual lives. This idea transforms the site from a static monument into a dynamic, functional machine made of stone, a computer of sorts that used the horizon and the movement of heavenly bodies to calculate time. But even the astronomical explanation doesn't satisfy every puzzle. The patterns are not perfectly uniform, and the purpose of such a massive, redundant calendar system remains unclear. Another fascinating, though more controversial, theory suggests the stones could have served a much more unexpected purpose, detecting seismic activity. Geologists have noted that the region of Brittany is crisscrossed with active fault lines. The specific placement of the stones, particularly the large upright menhirs, might be strategically located above these fissures. The theory proposes that the stones could act as resonators, vibrating in a specific way when low-frequency seismic waves traveled through the ground from distant earthquakes. In this scenario, a skilled observer, perhaps a shaman or a designated watcher, could literally feel or hear the unique hum of a particular stone and interpret it as a warning of tremors to come or as messages from the earth itself. While difficult to prove, this idea connects the monuments directly to the living geology of the landscape, framing them not as separate from nature but as profound interpreters of its hidden forces. Ultimately, the true meaning of the Karnak stones may lie in a combination of all these ideas, and perhaps others we haven't yet considered. They likely functioned on multiple levels simultaneously, a territorial marker for one group, a sacred processional path for another, and an astronomical tool for the initiated few. Their power lies in this very ambiguity. They are a Rorschach test etched in granite, reflecting back at us whatever framework we choose to apply. We see in them our own fascination with astronomy, our respect for territoriality, or our awe of the sacred. The stones themselves remain silent, their creators having left no written records, no illustrations, no clear instructions. They are a message from a world that thought in terms of myth and stone, not text and logic. To walk among them is to feel the presence of that lost world, to stand in the midst of a question that was never meant to be answered but only experienced. The Karnak alignments are not a problem to be solved so much as a profound statement to be felt, a permanent reminder that some of humanity's greatest achievements were meant not to explain the world but to harmonize with it. Our journey through history's greatest puzzles now brings us to arguably the most famous lost world of all, a legend so powerful it has captivated imaginations for more than 2,000 years. We are, of course, talking about Atlantis. The entire saga begins with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who around 360 BC introduced this fabled civilization in his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. He didn't present it as a myth, but as a historical account passed down to his ancestor Solon by Egyptian priests. According to Plato, Atlantis was a formidable naval power that lay in front of the Pillars of Hercules, which we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. It was an island continent larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, a utopian society of immense wealth, advanced engineering, and unmatched military might. Its capital was a marvel of concentric rings of water and land, bridged by canals and adorned with magnificent palaces and temples sheathed in a precious metal called orichalcum. But this greatness was corrupted by pride. Plato writes that the Atlanteans became morally bankrupt, greedy, and aggressive, launching an unprovoked attack on the peaceful nations of the Eastern Mediterranean. Their invasion was repelled by the virtuous Athenians, and then, in a single terrible day and night of cataclysmic earthquakes and floods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea and vanished forever. The central question that has haunted historians and adventurers ever since is a simple one. Did Plato invent this story as a philosophical allegory, or was he recording a distorted memory of a real historical catastrophe? Plato himself was a storyteller who often used parables to illustrate his ideas about the ideal state and the consequences of moral decay. In this context, Atlantis serves as the perfect counterpoint to his idealized Athens, a powerful warning about how even the greatest civilization can be destroyed by its own hubris and its turn away from the gods. Many scholars argue that the entire tale is a literary device, a powerful fiction created to make a philosophical point, and that searching for its physical location is a fundamental misunderstanding of its purpose. Yet, the human desire to find a kernel of truth in such a captivating story is irresistible. This has led to a breathtaking array of theories about where this lost empire might have once stood. One of the most compelling and scientifically supported ideas connects Atlantis to the very real destruction of the Minoan civilization on the island of Thera, now known as Santorini. Around the year 1600 BC, the volcanic island of Thera erupted in one of the most colossal blasts in human history, an event estimated to be 4 times more powerful than the eruption of Krakatoa. The eruption utterly destroyed the Minoan settlement on Thera, known as Akrotiri, which was frozen in time under meters of ash much like Pompeii. The cataclysm also generated massive tsunamis that would have slammed into the coast of Crete, 70 miles to the south, devastating the palace complexes of the Minoans, including the Great Palace of Knossos. The Minoans were a highly advanced seafaring people with sophisticated art and architecture, a clear parallel to Plato's description of Atlantean culture. The timeline, however, is a problem. Thera erupted over 1,000 years before Plato was born and over 9,000 years after the date he gives for Atlantis's fall. Proponents of this theory suggest that the Egyptian priest Solon spoke to might have misread their own ancient records, confusing Egyptian symbols for hundreds with symbols for thousands, which would neatly align the dates. Other theories cast the net far wider across the globe. Some researchers, fixated on Plato's description of a continent-sized land beyond the Pillars of Hercules, have looked to the Caribbean. They point to the submerged geological formations known as the Bimini rode off the coast of the Bahamas, which some believe are the remnants of a paved highway or a wall, though most geologists identify them as a natural formation of Bikrak. The Azores, an archipelago in the mid-Atlantic, have also been proposed as the mountain peaks of the sunken continent. Then there are the more fringe ideas placing Atlantis in Antarctica, claiming a shift in the Earth's crust buried it under ice, or even identifying it with South America, suggesting the incredible engineering feats of pre-Columbian cultures are a legacy of Atlantean knowledge. The enduring power of the Atlantis legend lies in this beautiful, frustrating ambiguity. It exists in a space between history and myth, a story so detailed it feels like it must be true, yet so grand it feels like it can't be. It taps into a deep, universal human fascination with the idea of a lost golden age, a superior ancestral culture that possessed secrets we have since forgotten. Every new underwater archaeological discovery, every ancient ruin found in a deep jungle, reignites the hope that we might one day find proof. Atlantis is more than a place, it is an idea. It represents our yearning for a past that was more magical and advanced, and it serves as an eternal cautionary tale about the fragility of even the most powerful civilizations in the face of nature's immense, unpredictable power. Whether it was ever real is almost beside the point. Its true legacy is the endless quest for knowledge it inspires, a drive to explore the depths of our oceans and the furthest reaches of our past, always wondering what other wonders might still be waiting to be found. Just as the legend of the Bermuda Triangle captured the Western imagination, a stretch of water in the Pacific near Japan has woven its own tapestry of fear and mystery, earning the ominous name the Devil's Sea, or Mano Yumi. This area, forming a rough triangle between Japan, the Bonin Islands, and the Philippines, shares a similar reputation for swallowing ships and aircraft whole, often without leaving a single piece of wreckage or sending a distress signal. Japanese lore is filled with tales of dragon gods and vengeful spirits residing in its depths, but the modern legend was largely cemented by author Charles Berlitz, who also popularized the Bermuda Triangle, drawing direct parallels between the two regions' alleged supernatural dangers. The disappearances here feel even more poignant, as many involved Japanese fishing vessels and their crews, vanishing into the vast, indifferent ocean, leaving behind only grieving families and a deepening sense of dread. The most compelling and scientifically grounded explanations for the devils sees ferocity point not to the paranormal, but to the raw, volatile geology of the region. This area is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically active zones on the planet. The seabed here is a dramatic, fractured landscape of deep trenches and underwater volcanoes. It is entirely plausible that a sudden, massive underwater eruption or a powerful seaquake could generate a catastrophic tsunami or create a column of bubbling, aerated water that would rob a ship of its buoyancy, causing it to sink almost instantly. Furthermore, the same methane hydrate eruption theory proposed for the Bermuda Triangle applies here with even greater force. The seafloor around Japan is known to contain vast deposits of these frozen gas crystals. A large-scale methane blowout could indeed create a bubbling froth on the surface that would decrease water density, causing a vessel to lose lift and plunge to the depths without warning. The gas could also rise into the air, potentially creating a combustible cloud that could ignite and cause a plane's engines to fail. Adding to these dangers are the region's notorious and unpredictable weather patterns. The Devil's Sea is frequently battered by typhoons of immense power, capable of generating colossal rogue waves that can appear out of nowhere and overwhelm even the largest vessels. These storms can develop with terrifying speed, giving sailors little time to react or send a mayday call. The powerful Kuroshio current, similar to the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic, flows directly through this area. This swift, turbulent ocean river can quickly disperse any debris from a disaster, erasing all evidence of a sinking within hours and making search and recovery missions nearly impossible. When you combine these natural hazards, volcanic activity, methane vents, violent storms, and a powerful current, you have a region that is inherently and exceptionally dangerous for travel, a perfect storm of environmental factors that needs no supernatural help to claim lives. However, a crucial distinction sets the Devil's Sea apart from its Atlantic counterpart and significantly dilutes its mystery. In the 1950s, the Japanese government, concerned about the losses of fishing boats, officially declared the Devil's Sea a danger zone and funded a serious research expedition to investigate. The vessel sent, the Kaiyomaru no 5, was a scientific ship manned by experts tasked with studying the phenomenon. Tragically and ironically, the ship itself vanished with all hands lost during its mission. While this event seemed to confirm the area's deadly reputation, it also provided a likely explanation. The research ship was probably itself a victim of the very volcanic activity it was sent to study. This tragic incident underscored the real, tangible dangers of the region rather than its mystical ones. In the decades since, geological surveys have largely demystified the Devil's Sea. Scientists have discovered that the area is not some anomalous vortex, but is actually home to a large, active submarine volcano. The frequent disappearances of small, wooden-hulled fishing boats throughout history can be logically attributed to this extreme environment. Unlike the Bermuda Triangle, which is a heavily trafficked area with statistics that don't support its mythical status, the Devil's Sea was historically traversed by smaller, less sturdy vessels that were far more vulnerable to its documented natural hazards. The legend persists not because of a higher than normal rate of disappearances, but because of powerful storytelling, cultural myths, and the human tendency to connect tragic, unrelated events into a single, sinister narrative. The true mystery of the Devil's Sea isn't why things disappear, but how a combination of factual danger and potent folklore can create a lasting modern myth, proving that sometimes the most powerful monsters are the ones we imagine for ourselves. Leaving behind the treacherous waters of the Devil's Sea, we journey high into the arid plains of southern Peru, where one of history's most visually stunning and perplexing mysteries is etched into the very fabric of the desert. Here, on a vast, wind-swept plateau between the Inca and Nazca valleys, lies a colossal canvas, but this is no ordinary landscape, it is a gallery of giants. Spread across nearly 500 square kilometers are the Nazca lines, hundreds of enormous geoglyphs created by removing the dark, sun-baked pebbles that cover the land to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath. This simple technique has produced a breathtaking array of figures, from perfectly straight lines that run for miles without deviating, to massive geometric shapes like trapezoids and triangles, and most famously, over 70 intricate drawings of animals and plants. There is a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider, a monkey with a spiraling tail, a massive orca, and even a humanoid figure often called the astronaut. The sheer scale of these designs is what defines the mystery. They are so immense that their forms can only be truly appreciated from the air, from a vantage point the creators themselves could never have achieved. This fundamental fact that the artists could not have seen their own work in its entirety is the spark that has ignited a century of speculation and debate. How did the Nazca people, who flourished between 200 BC and 600 CE, achieve such staggering precision and scale without the ability to fly? The most widely accepted archaeological theory points to sophisticated low-tech methods. It's believed that the Nazca could have designed the figures first on a smaller scale, perhaps using a grid system. They might have then scaled up this design by driving stakes into the ground and using ropes to mark out the paths, painstakingly clearing the dark stones along these guidelines to reveal the lighter earth below. The stable, dry, and windless climate of the plateau has acted as a perfect preservative, ensuring these shallow designs have remained visible for 2 millennia. This explanation demystifies the how to a degree, showcasing the incredible patience, coordination, and geometric skill of this ancient culture. But it leaves the much more profound question of why almost completely unanswered. Why would a society invest such immense, generations-long effort into creating art that they could never fully see? The most enduring and logical theory suggests the lines had a profound ritualistic purpose connected to water, the most precious and elusive resource in the desert. The Nazca were an agricultural people, and their survival depended on understanding and appeasing the deities they believed controlled the weather. Many of the lines lead to sources of water or are aligned with underground aquifers. The animal figures, the monkey, the hummingbird, the killer whale, may have represented totemic spirits or gods associated with rain and fertility. Archaeologists like Johann Reinhard have proposed that the lines were sacred paths walked upon during religious ceremonies to pray for water. The act of creating and maintaining these pathways itself could have been a form of worship, a communal effort to demonstrate devotion and plead for life-giving rain. From this perspective, the geoglyphs were not meant to be seen by people, but by the gods in the sky. Their immense size was a feature, not a bug. It was a way to make their prayers large enough and impressive enough to be seen from the heavens. A more practical, though related, theory posits that the lines served as a massive astronomical calendar. Researchers like Maria Reich, a German mathematician who dedicated her life to studying the lines, argued that many of them pointed directly to the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and significant stars and constellations during solstices and equinoxes. In this view, the desert was transformed into a gigantic observatory. The lines could have been used to mark the changing seasons, which was critical for knowing when to plant and harvest crops. The animal shapes might have represented constellations important to Nazca cosmology. This idea turns the plateau into a functional, though mystical, tool for survival, blending practical astronomy with religious belief. However, not all lines have clear celestial alignments, and the theory has been challenged by others who point out that the precise movement of stars over centuries, known as precession, would have shifted these alignments out of sync over time, making a permanent calendar unreliable. Of course, the most sensational explanation is the one that has captured the popular imagination for decades, the ancient astronaut theory. Popularized by figures like Erich von Däniken in the 1960s, this idea suggests the Nazca lines were landing strips or navigational markers for extraterrestrial spacecraft. The immense runway-like trapezoids and the fact that the figures are only visible from high above are presented as evidence that they were meant for beings who could fly. Proponents ask, how else could a primitive culture achieve such scale and precision without aerial guidance? While a thrilling narrative for science fiction, this theory is overwhelmingly dismissed by archaeologists. It ignores the demonstrated low-tech methods the Nazca could have used, and more importantly, it strips a sophisticated ancient culture of its own ingenuity and achievement, attributing their work to outside forces rather than their own intelligence, skill, and profound spiritual drive. The lines are a testament to human capability, not proof of alien visitation. The true power of the Nazca lines lies in their resistance to a single, simple answer. They were likely a multifunctional landscape serving different purposes at different times. Some lines might have been astronomical markers, others sacred pathways for water ceremonies. The straight lines could have been processional routes used in rituals, while the animal figures may have served as tribal symbols or offerings to specific deities. Their creation might have also served a powerful social function, uniting communities in a common, monumental project that reinforced cultural identity and cohesion. They are a perfect example of how the ancient world did not separate the practical from the spiritual. Instead, these concepts were woven together into a single, holistic understanding of the universe. The Nazca lines are not a mystery because we cannot understand how they were made, but because we are still trying to fully comprehend the complex, rich, and deeply spiritual worldview of the people who felt compelled to turn their entire desert into a message to the gods. From the sun-scorched plains of Nazca, we now travel to a place of bitter cold and profound dread, a remote mountain pass in the northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. In the winter of 1959, this desolate location became the stage for one of the most chilling and enduring mysteries of the 20th century, an event that would come to be known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. It began as a routine hiking expedition. A group of 10 experienced university students and athletes, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, set out on a challenging trek through the northern Urals. Their goal was to reach a mountain called Artorten, a journey rated as Category Roman 3, the most difficult grade in the Soviet hiking system. These were not novices, they were skilled, well-equipped, and conditioned for the harsh winter environment. One member, Yuri Yudin, fell ill and turned back early, a decision that would save his life. The remaining 9 pressed on into the snow-covered wilderness. They were expected to send a telegram upon their return by February 12th. When no word came, a massive search and rescue operation was launched. What the searchers would eventually find would defy all logic and spawn decades of speculation and fear. The first discovery on February 26th was the group's tent, abandoned on the slopes of a mountain the hikers had named Kolatsiak, which translates ominously to Dead Mountain. The scene was one of utter chaos, but a chaos that made no sense. The tent had been cut open from the inside, as if its occupants had to urgently escape. Their belongings, warm clothes, boots, supplies, and even their passports and money, were all left behind, neatly organized inside. Footprints leading away from the tent told a bizarre story. Most of the hikers were barefoot or wearing only socks, despite the sub-zero temperatures that would have been well below -20 degrees Fahrenheit. The trail led down into the tree line about a mile away, where the horror truly began to unfold. The bodies were found in separate groups, and the condition of each group only deepened the mystery. The first 2 hikers were discovered near the remains of a small fire, dressed only in their underwear. They appeared to have died from hypothermia. 3 more bodies were found between the fire and the tent, also seemingly frozen to death. The final 4 bodies were not discovered until over 2 months later, buried under several feet of snow in a ravine. These victims had sustained catastrophic injuries that were utterly inconsistent with an avalanche or a simple accident. One had a fractured skull, another had massive chest trauma with multiple ribs shattered so forcefully that it was compared to the impact of a car crash. Most chillingly, one of the women was missing her tongue along with parts of her eyes and lips. Crucially, there were no signs of a struggle, no external wounds, and perhaps most puzzling of all, the official investigation noted that the victim's skin had a strange orange tan, and some of their clothes were found to be highly radioactive. The Soviet authorities, after a brief investigation, concluded the hikers had died due to a compelling natural force, and the case was closed and classified. This opaque verdict, combined with the bizarre evidence, created a vacuum that has been filled with theories ranging from the scientific to the supernatural for over 60 years. The most widely accepted modern explanation points to a rare and terrifying natural phenomenon, a slab avalanche. Proponents of this theory argue that a small, localized avalanche could have struck the tent in the middle of the night. The initial impact might not have been fatal, but the force and the sudden burial would have panicked the experienced hikers, causing them to cut their way out in a state of shock and flee into the deadly cold with inadequate clothing. This could explain the internal injuries found on the later victims. If they had burrowed into the snow in the ravine for shelter, a secondary avalanche could have fallen on top of them, creating the crushing trauma. However, seasoned avalanche experts have heavily criticized this theory. The slope where the tent was pitched was not steep enough for a significant avalanche, and no evidence of avalanche debris was recorded by the original investigators. Another compelling natural theory involves infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that are inaudible to the human ear but can induce feelings of intense dread, panic, and even physical illness. The unique wind conditions around Kolotsiek, funneling over the peak, could have generated powerful, resonant infrasound that literally terrified the hikers out of their minds. In a blind, primal panic, they might have slashed their way out of the tent and fled, becoming disoriented and succumbing to the cold. This would account for their irrational behavior without any visible external threat. Yet, this remains a hypothesis, as infrasound's effects, while documented, are difficult to prove after the fact. Of course, the lack of a satisfying natural answer has given rise to more speculative ideas. The presence of radioactive traces on the clothing and the mysterious orange tint to the skin have fueled theories of a secret military weapons test gone wrong. Perhaps the hikers inadvertently stumbled upon a test site for a new weapon, such as a concussive device or a sonic weapon, and were accidentally killed, leading to a cover-up. Others have pointed to the area's history with Soviet missile programs, suggesting a stray rocket might have caused the injuries. Then there are the more outlandish suggestions from attacks by the indigenous Mansi people. Though there was no evidence of this and the Mansi were cleared, to encounters with a Yeti or other unknown creature, or even paranormal forces and UFOs. The sheer variety of theories is a testament to how thoroughly the evidence confounds every attempt at a simple explanation. The Dyatlov Pass incident endures because it is a perfect storm of unanswered questions. It combines the relatable fear of being lost in the wilderness with the unsettling presence of forces we cannot see or understand. The hikers were rational, skilled, and prepared, yet they acted in a way that was completely irrational, as if fleeing an invisible existential terror. The case was officially reopened by Russian authorities in 2019, and a conclusion was reached in 2021, once again attributing the deaths to an avalanche. Yet for many, this final answer feels insufficient, a tidy explanation offered to close the books on a messy, terrifying mystery. It fails to fully account for the bizarre injuries, the radiation, or the sheer panic implied by the scene. The incident remains a dark, frozen moment in time, a stark reminder that nature, or perhaps something else, can hold secrets that defy all our experience and logic, leaving behind only footprints in the snow and a mystery that continues to haunt the imagination. While the frozen terror of Dyatlov Pass represents a modern enigma of the natural world, our next mystery is an object of breathtaking beauty and intricate craftsmanship that has ignited debates between archaeologists, mystics, and storytellers for over a century. Imagine a human skull carved from a single, flawless block of the purest clear or milky quartz crystal. It is perfectly proportioned with a detached mandible that moves on delicate hinges, and its surface is so highly polished that it seems to glow with an otherworldly light. This is the iconic crystal skull, and for generations it was presented as a priceless artifact from a lost ancient civilization, a relic that held the secrets of the Maya or the Aztecs. Its origins were shrouded in tales of adventure, supposedly discovered in the 1920s by Anna LeGillan Mitchell-Hedges, the adopted daughter of a British adventurer, during an expedition to the ancient Maya city of Lubontan in Belize. According to the romantic story, the skull was found on her 17th birthday, lying atop an altar in a ruins, making for a discovery that was almost too perfect to be true. And indeed, it wasn't. The captivating narrative began to unravel under the scrutiny of modern science. The first major red flag was the skull's astonishing craftsmanship. The quartz crystal is an incredibly hard material, rating a 7 on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. This means it can only be effectively shaped and carved using abrasives with a similar or greater hardness, like diamond or ruby. To create something as complex, symmetrical, and perfectly polished as the Mitchell-Hedges skull with ancient hand tools would have been a nearly impossible task, requiring generations of meticulous, uninterrupted labor. Furthermore, detailed microscopic analysis conducted by researchers like Margaret Sachs at the British Museum revealed telltale signs of modern manufacturing. The surfaces showed evidence of being worked with high-speed, rotary wheels coated in industrial diamond or carborundum, tools that simply did not exist in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. The final, damning evidence came in 2008, when the skull and others like it were analyzed by scientists at both the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution. Using advanced techniques like electron microscopy and X-ray crystallography, they found no microscopic scratches that would indicate hand carving with ancient tools. Instead, the patterns were consistent with modern jewelers' equipment from the 19th century. The conclusion was inescapable. The most famous crystal skulls were elaborate and beautiful hoaxes, almost certainly crafted in Europe, likely in Germany, in the mid to late 1800s. This scientific debunking, however, has done remarkably little to dim the mystical allure of these objects. For many in the New Age and metaphysical communities, the skulls are not valued for their historical provenance but for their perceived energetic properties. Quartz crystal is a piezoelectrical material, meaning it can generate an electrical charge under mechanical stress. This scientific fact is often woven into a narrative of ancient wisdom, suggesting that the skulls were designed as powerful energy amplifiers or storage devices. Believers claim the skulls can aid in healing, enhance psychic abilities, facilitate communication with other dimensions, and even store the knowledge and consciousness of ancient ancestors. They are seen as part of a global network of sacred objects, and gatherings known as skull ceremonies are held where people meditate with them to raise the collective vibration of the planet. The very fact that they are shaped like a human skull, a universal symbol of mortality and the seat of consciousness, adds a profound layer of symbolic power, transforming them from mere carvings into potent talismans for spiritual exploration. This enduring belief speaks to a fascinating human tendency, the desire for a past that was more magical and technologically advanced than our history books allow. The crystal skull mythos taps into the same wellspring of wonder as legends of Atlantis or ancient astronauts. It suggests that indigenous cultures possessed profound, lost knowledge that our modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The skulls become a physical bridge to this idealized past, a tangible object onto which we can project our hopes for hidden wisdom and unexplained phenomena. Their flawless, enigmatic beauty seems to defy a mundane origin, compelling us to imagine a more mysterious explanation even when the evidence points elsewhere. They remain a powerful cultural icon, immortalized in blockbuster films like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which further cemented their place in the popular imagination as artifacts of immense and dangerous power. Ultimately, the crystal skulls are a perfect metaphor for the intersection of archaeology and myth. They are scientifically proven fakes, yet they continue to generate genuine wonder. Their true power lies not in where they came from, but in what they represent. Our endless fascination with the unknown and our deep-seated need to believe that the world still holds ancient secrets waiting to be unlocked. Deep in the annals of Roman military history, few stories are as compelling or as shrouded in mystery as the fate of Legio Roman 9 Hispana, the 9th Legion. This wasn't some fledgling unit, it was a battle-hardened force, a key instrument in the Emperor Claudius's conquest of Britain in 43 AD. For decades, the 9th was a formidable presence, quelling rebellions and pushing the empire's frontier northward, its soldiers stationed at the great fortress of Eboracum, what we now call York. Then, sometime around the year 120 AD, this proud legion, comprising over 5,000 men, simply vanishes from the historical record. It's as if they marched right off the edge of the known world, leaving behind one of antiquity's most tantalizing puzzles. The most dramatic and enduring theory, popularized by countless books and films, is that the legion was annihilated in a catastrophic battle against the fierce northern tribes of Caledonia, modern-day Scotland. The region was a nightmare for the Romans, a misty, rugged landscape of hills and forests controlled by warriors the Romans called the Picts, a name derived from the Latin for painted people. The last solid record of the 9th Legion places them in York, tasked with rebuilding the fortress there after a period of unrest. It is entirely plausible that they were then ordered north on a campaign to subdue these tribes once and for all, a campaign from which they never returned. The silence that follows could be the silence of a complete military disaster, a Roman defeat so total and so embarrassing that imperial records might have deliberately omitted it to avoid the stain on Rome's invincible image. The romantic allure of this theory is powerful, the idea of a disciplined Roman army being swallowed whole by the savage, misty wilderness of the ancient north. It paints a picture of final, desperate stands and lost eagles, a tale that has captivated imaginations for generations. However, many historians find the annihilation theory a bit too neat and cinematic. The Roman military machine was meticulous in its record-keeping, and the complete destruction of an entire legion would have been an event of seismic political and military importance. While the Romans weren't above suppressing bad news, a loss of this magnitude would likely have left some trace, some ripple of evidence in the letters of politicians or the histories of the era. The absence of any such clear record has led to alternative, more bureaucratic explanations. It's entirely possible the 9th Legion was simply transferred. The Roman Empire was vast, and legions were moved between trouble spots as needed. There is some fragmentary evidence, though it is hotly debated, that suggests elements of the 9th may have been stationed on the Rhine frontier or even in the east, perhaps in Judea, during the Bloody Bar Kokhba revolt around 130 AD. If this is true, the legion may not have been destroyed in Britain at all, but rather bled dry in another conflict, its remaining men absorbed into other units until its identity was gradually dissolved away through attrition and reassignment. This theory is less glamorous but often more convincing to scholars, who point out that a legion's disgrace could also come from a major defeat that didn't involve its total destruction, leading to its formal disbandment and erasure from the army lists as a punishment. Yet another fascinating possibility lies not in glorious death or quiet reassignment, but in assimilation. Could the lost legion have simply stayed? After years of service in a distant land far from the warmth of Italy, some veterans chose to settle down in the provinces where they had been stationed. Is it so difficult to imagine a scenario where, after a particularly devastating campaign or a politically motivated decision from Rome, the remaining nucleus of the Ninth was not replaced? The soldiers, granted their land grants in Britain, would have married local women, raised families, and slowly blended into the fabric of the very culture they were once sent to conquer. Their Roman identity would have faded over generations, but their genetic and cultural legacy would have become a permanent part of Britain's story. This theory turns the mystery from a military tragedy into a story of slow, quiet cultural fusion, suggesting that the legion didn't vanish but instead became something else entirely, its legacy living on not in history books but in the people themselves. The enduring power of this mystery stems from that very lack of a clean, definitive answer. The loss of the Ninth Legion coincides with a period of significant upheaval in Roman Britain. The Emperor Hadrian, deciding the empire had overextended itself, began constructing his famous wall to separate Roman territory from the barbarian lands to the north. The disappearance of a major military force fits neatly into this narrative of imperial retraction and reassessment. The Ninth has become a blank slate, a historical void onto which we can project our own stories. For some, it's a thrilling tale of military adventure and a doomed last stand. For others, it's a lesson in the impersonal, bureaucratic machinery of a vast empire. And for others still, it's a poignant reminder that history is not just about empires and emperors, but about the thousands of individual soldiers whose ultimate fates are often lost to time, their stories ending not with a period but with an ellipsis. The Lost Legion continues to march through our imagination, a ghostly column forever walking into the northern mists, daring us to discover what really happened. While the fate of the Ninth Legion speaks to a mystery lost to the deep past, our next event is a modern enigma, a monument of stark granite and cryptic intention that rose from the Georgia soil only to vanish in a cloud of controversy. In 1979, in a remote field in Elbert County, Georgia, an elegantly dressed, articulate stranger using the pseudonym Robert C. Christian hired a local granite company to build a massive and complex structure. He claimed to represent a small group of Americans who had been planning this project for decades, a group that wished to remain anonymous forever. The result, unveiled in 1980, was the Georgia Guidestones, 4 towering 19-foot-tall granite slabs, each weighing over 42,000 pounds, oriented to track the sun's movement and capped with a massive stone lintel. A granite pillar stood at the center and a capstone lay on the ground nearby. But it wasn't the architecture that made the monument infamous, it was the message. Carved into the stones in 8 different languages — English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian — were 10 guidelines or principles for humanity. These directives began with seemingly noble goals like maintaining humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature and guiding reproduction wisely to improve fitness and diversity. Yet, it was the first and most startling guideline that would fuel decades of intense speculation and fear. A call to keep the global population below 500 million people, a number that would require a catastrophic reduction of the world's population by over 90%. The identity of R.C. Christian and his patrons remains one of the central mysteries. The name itself is widely believed to be a tribute to Christian Rosencreuz, the legendary founder of the Rosicrucian Order, a secret society focused on esoteric wisdom. This connection immediately cast the Guidestones not as a benign public art project, but as the work of a shadowy cabal with a grand, unsettling plan for humanity. The monument also functioned as a sophisticated astronomical calendar. Its structure featured channels aligned with the solstices and equinoxes, a hole drilled to frame the North Star, and a slot that tracked the sun's yearly journey. This precision, combined with the multilingual messages, suggested the creators saw their guidelines as a universal, timeless prescription for a new age, a modern Stonehenge built not for ancient priests but for survivors of a future catastrophe. A granite tablet set in the ground nearby explained the astrological features and reiterated that the sponsors wished to remain anonymous, further deepening the aura of secrecy. This combination of anonymity, celestial alignment, and a call for drastic population control made the Guidestones a lightning rod for conspiracy theories. For many, the monument was not a well-intentioned warning but a blatant mission statement for a globalist elite. It was seen as a blueprint for a new world order, a plan to dramatically cull the human population through war, engineered pandemics, or other nefarious means, leaving only 500 million easily controlled survivors to rebuild a soulless, sustainable utopia. The Guidestones were dubbed the American Stonehenge by some and the 10 Commandments of the Antichrist by others. It became a pilgrimage site for those fascinated by the occult, a hated symbol for those who feared global governance, and a curious roadside attraction for everyone else. The stones stood for over 4 decades, a silent, grey Rorschach test in the countryside, where every visitor saw their own deepest fears or hopes reflected in its polished surface. The mystery reached its violent climax on the morning of July 6, 2022. A security camera captured a massive explosion that heavily damaged one of the granite slabs. Later that day, authorities, citing safety concerns, demolished the entire structure. The act of destruction was as enigmatic as the monument's creation. To some, it was an act of righteous defiance against a symbol of evil. To others, it was a false flag operation, a way for the very forces that built it to erase the evidence of their plans now that their message had been received. The truth was far more mundane. A young man was eventually arrested and charged with the vandalism, his motives seemingly rooted in personal religious extremism. But the damage was done. The physical Guidestones were gone, reduced to rubble, leaving only the foundation and the mystery. The destruction did not solve the puzzle, it only cemented it. The Guidestones now exist primarily as photographs and furious online debates. Were they a hoax, a warning, a threat? The most charitable interpretation is that they were a radical environmentalist's cry of despair, a stark monument intended to shock humanity into recognizing the unsustainability of its growth, using extreme language to provoke serious discussion. In this light, the population guideline was not a literal prescription for genocide, but a hyperbolic warning about the dangers of overpopulation. The other principles, which advocated for harmony with nature, justice, and seeking solutions over dogma, support this more benign reading. Yet the anonymous, superior tone of the creators, their choice to speak from the shadows rather than engage in public discourse, forever tainted their message. The Georgia Guidestones stand, in their absence, as a powerful symbol of our age's deep anxieties. They represent our fear of unseen forces shaping our future, our paranoia about technology and control, and the fundamental conflict between individual freedom and the collective good. They were a question carved in stone, and now that the stone is gone, we are left only with the echo of that question, a debate over intentions that can now never be fully confirmed or denied. While the Georgia Guidestones presented a modern mystery of anonymous intention, our next case is a deeply personal and human enigma, a story that begins with a single, unknown man on a quiet beach and spirals out into a web of international intrigue, cryptic codes, and unanswered questions that has haunted Australia for over 70 years. On the 1st of December 1948, just after 6 in the morning, the stillness of Somerton Beach in Adelaide was broken by a discovery that would become one of the world's most famous cold cases. A local jockey named John Lyons was out for a walk when he noticed a well-dressed man lying propped against the seawall, seemingly asleep. He looked peaceful, his legs crossed and his head resting back, as if he had simply decided to take in the sunrise. But something felt off. Later that day, another couple saw him and noticed that he hadn't moved an inch. Flies were crawling over his face, yet he made no effort to swat them away. Police and a doctor were called to the scene, and they confirmed the worst: the man was dead. The scene was peculiar from the start. The man was in his 40s, physically fit and handsome, dressed in a high-quality suit and sweater despite the summer heat. His shoes were freshly polished and his clothes were meticulously clean, with all the labels carefully removed, as if someone had systematically erased any hint of his origin. In his pockets they found a used bus ticket, a packet of chewing gum, some matches, a half-empty packet of cigarettes, and a fully paid, unused railway ticket from Adelaide to the nearby beachside suburb of Henley Beach. There was no wallet, no cash, and most notably, no identification of any kind. The initial autopsy revealed nothing conclusive. There were no signs of violence, no visible injuries, and his organs appeared healthy. The pathologist, however, was deeply puzzled by the man's final physical state. His spleen was enlarged to 3 times its normal size, his liver was distended with congested blood, and he had suffered a massive hemorrhage into his stomach. The symptoms were consistent with a powerful, fast-acting poison, but no trace of any known toxin could be found in his system. It was as if the cause of death had simply vanished without a trace. The mystery deepened just a few months later when police discovered an unclaimed brown suitcase at the Adelaide railway station's cloakroom. Evidence suggested it belonged to the dead man. Inside, they found more clothes, once again with every single label meticulously removed. The only exceptions were a stencil kit of the kind used by military personnel to mark property, a thread card of an unusual orange Barber brand thread, and a table knife that had been ground down to be unusually sharp. The contents pointed toward a man who was methodical, perhaps even paranoid about concealing his identity, but the most tantalizing clue was yet to be found. During a second examination of the man's possessions, a small, rolled-up scrap of paper was discovered deep in a hidden fob pocket sewn into his trousers. On it was printed 2 words, Taman Shud. This phrase, meaning ended or finished in Persian, was identified as the last line of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of philosophical poems. A nationwide appeal was launched to find the specific book this scrap had been torn from. Miraculously, a local businessman came forward. He had found a rare first edition copy of the book in the back seat of his unlocked car, which had been parked near Somerton Beach on the night the man died. And in the back of this book, detectives made a breathtaking discovery. Faintly penciled were a series of letters arranged in a seemingly random pattern. This was the now infamous Somerton Man Code. WRGO-A-B-A-B-D-M-L-I-A-O-I-A-T-B-O-A-T-A-N-P-T-S-T-G-A-P-A. Beneath this cipher were 2 lines that seemed to be written in a different hand, a telephone number and the words PP1/6/43 Jeston. The phone number led investigators to a young woman named Jessica Jo Thompson, a former nurse who lived in the area. When questioned, she admitted that the code was not her handwriting, though she recognized the book as one she had given to a former army lieutenant named Alf Boxall during the war. She claimed she did not know the Somerton man and could not explain why her number was in the book. Her reaction upon being shown a plaster cast of the dead man's face, however, was telling to investigators. She visibly panicked, her hand flying to her mouth before she insisted once more that she did not recognize him. Her behavior suggested she knew far more than she was letting on. This convergence of clues has spawned decades of intense speculation. The leading theory casts the Somerton Man as a Cold War spy. The meticulous removal of labels, the use of a stencil kit, the mysterious code, and the potential use of an undetectable poison all fit the profile of espionage. The Taman Shud phrase could have been a signal or a suicide pill indicator. Perhaps he was a Soviet agent who was poisoned after a meeting went wrong, or who was eliminated to protect a larger operation. Jessica Thompson, it was later revealed, had studied microbiology and was fluent in Russian, facts that only added fuel to the spy theory. Was she his handler or a fellow agent? Was the code a one-time pad message that was never decrypted? A more tragic, romantic theory posits that the Somerton Man was a lost love. Perhaps he was Alf Boxall himself, though Boxall was later found alive and well, still possessing the inscribed copy of the rubaiyat that Jessica had given him. Maybe the man was a different, unknown suitor from Jessica's past, a man who had traveled to Adelaide to find her, only to be rejected or to discover a life she had moved on from. In this version, the code is not a spy message but a personal cipher, a final, desperate poem or message meant only for her. His death, then, could have been a suicide from a broken heart, using a rare toxin to end his life on the beach near her home. This theory is supported by the content of the rubaiyat itself, which often meditates on fate, love, and mortality, with a Taman Shud page specifically containing verses about letting go and the end of life. Despite numerous attempts by top cryptographers, including teams from the Australian Defence Force and the American NSA, the code has never been conclusively broken. Some claim to have solved it, producing messages like, "It's over, I'm ending it all, I can't go on without you," which supports the romance theory, while others have derived phrases hinting at Soviet activities. The truth remains locked away. Even modern science has provided only partial answers. In 2022, after years of legal battles, researchers were granted permission to exhume the body. DNA was successfully extracted, and genealogical research suggested his name might have been Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. This identification, while promising, is still considered probable rather than definitive by many investigators, and it does nothing to explain the bizarre circumstances of his death, the code in the book, or his connection to Jessica Thompson. The case of the Somerton Man endures because it is a perfect human puzzle. He was someone's son, perhaps someone's lover, and possibly someone's agent. He sits at the crossroads of a love story and a spy thriller, a man who took his true name to the grave and left behind only a cryptic calling card that we are still trying to read, a final, silent message from a soul who wanted to remain unknown. Deep beneath the chaotic surface of the waves, in the crushing blackness of the ocean's depths, our planet has its own secret language, a symphony of low-frequency rumbles, groans, and pulses that travel for thousands of miles through the deep sound channel. Most of these sounds are the mundane conversations of geology and ice, but in the summer of 1997, the hydrophones of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, originally built to track Soviet submarines, picked up something that defied all categorization. It was a sound so powerful, so bizarre, and so utterly immense that it would capture the global imagination and ignite a mystery that would take more than a decade to unravel. They called it the bloop. The sound itself was recorded off the southern coast of South America and was detected by multiple sensors over a range of more than 3,000 miles. It was an ultra-low frequency sound that rose rapidly in frequency for about 1 minute, and was of sufficient amplitude to be heard on multiple sensors at that great distance. To the scientists who first analyzed it, the most striking feature was its organic, almost biological quality. It didn't sound like the sharp crack of breaking ice or the steady rumble of an earthquake. It had a distinct, pulsing quality that to many ears sounded alive. When the sound was sped up for analysis, it bore an uncanny and deeply unsettling resemblance to the vocalizations of living creatures, like the low-frequency calls of blue whales. There was one monumental difference, however. The bloop was vastly more powerful. Based on the amplitude of the signal, whatever made this sound would have to be a creature of almost unimaginable size, far larger than any known animal on Earth. The most obvious and terrifying conclusion was that the bloop was the call of a colossal, undiscovered deep-sea behemoth. This idea was pure rocket fuel for the imagination. The deep ocean is the last truly unexplored frontier on our planet, a place where we regularly discover new species that seem to have swam straight out of a nightmare. The thought that something even larger than a blue whale, the largest animal known to have ever existed, could be lurking in the abyss was both thrilling and terrifying. Speculation ran wild. Was it a giant squid of truly biblical proportions? Could it be a surviving prehistoric reptile, like a supersized plesiosaur? The fact that the sound's point of origin was roughly mapped to a remote area of the South Pacific near the fringes of Antarctica, not far from the fictional location of H.P. Lovecraft's sunken city of Arlaye and its sleeping cosmic horror Cthulhu, only added a layer of deliciously dark mythology to the mystery. For years, the bloop became the poster child for oceanic mystery, a tantalizing piece of evidence that the age of discovery was far from over and that the deep still held secrets beyond our wildest dreams. The scientific community, however, was not content with monster hunts. As the years passed, acoustic technology and our understanding of ice phenomena advanced significantly. By 2011, after more than a decade of analysis and comparison, NOAA scientists finally announced a much more plausible, though far less sensational, explanation. The source of the bloop, they concluded, was almost certainly a massive icequake. Specifically, they pointed to the sound of a large iceberg fracturing and calving from an Antarctic glacier. When ice undergoes this kind of tremendous stress and breakage, it can generate extremely powerful, low-frequency sounds that rumble through the ocean. The unique, pulsing quality of the bloop could be explained by the specific way the ice cracked and vibrated as it broke apart. Scientists were able to compare the bloop's acoustic signature to those of known icequakes and found them to be a near-perfect match. The case for most researchers was definitively closed. The bloop was not a creature, it was the sound of the cryosphere, the voice of a continent of ice screaming in the polar silence. Yet, for a dedicated group of enthusiasts and some rogue researchers, the icequake explanation doesn't feel entirely sufficient. They point out that while the sound may resemble ice noise, its unique waveform and its concentrated point of origin still leave room for doubt. The deep ocean is a place of constant noise, a cacophony of geological and biological sounds, and we have only just begun to listen. Is it so impossible that an unknown creature, perhaps a giant species of squid or a whale we have yet to document, could produce a sound of such magnitude? After all, we are discovering new, massive species like the 25-foot-long oarfish in modern times. The icequake theory may be the most logical and scientifically supported answer, but the bloop endures as a symbol because it represents the enduring allure of the unknown. It is a reminder that even when science provides an answer, the vast, dark wilderness of the deep sea will always be a place where our imagination can swim freely, wondering what else might be down there, listening to our hydrophones and waiting to be found. Yet while the bloop's mystery may have faded into the cold logic of glacial ice, our next story is fueled by a far more primal and enduring force, the burning allure of gold. This legend doesn't reside in the deep ocean, but in the scorching, treacherous heart of the American Southwest. For over a century, the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, Arizona, have guarded one of history's most infamous secrets. A lost mine of such fabled wealth that it has drawn countless prospectors to their doom and cemented its place as the ultimate American treasure myth. This is the story of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, a tale woven from equal parts hope, greed, and death, set against a backdrop of stark, unforgiving beauty. The legend, as it's most commonly told, centers on a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, though history would forever know him as the Dutchman, a common American mispronunciation of Deutsch. In the 1860s or 70s, Waltz supposedly discovered an incredibly rich gold vein in the Superstitions, a source of ore so pure that the gold was practically spilling from the rock. He would periodically arrive in Phoenix with his saddlebags filled with high-grade gold, spending it freely but always remaining secretive about its origin. On his deathbed in 1891, the story goes, he finally divulged clues to his caretaker, Julia Thomas. He spoke of a mine hidden in a rugged canyon, located under the shadow of a distinctive landmark called the Weaver's Needle, and said it could be found by standing at a certain spot where the setting sun cast a shadow pointing directly toward the entrance. With these cryptic directions, the greatest treasure hunt in American history began, and the mountains began to claim their price. The true, historical Jacob Waltz was indeed a real prospector, but the facts of his life are far murkier than the legend. He was born in Germany in around 1810 and arrived in the United States during the gold rush years. He did file mining claims and was known to have some wealth, likely from a small, productive claim he worked near the Superstitions. The deathbed confession to Julia Thomas, however, is highly suspect. Thomas was not a nurse but a local businesswoman who dabbled in prospecting and likely recognized the power of a good story. Shortly after Waltz's death, she organized the first expedition to find the mine based on his clues, and when she failed, she began selling maps to the location for $7 apiece. It was a brilliant bit of entrepreneurship that transformed a local rumor into a national obsession. She essentially created the modern legend of the Lost Dutchman, proving that sometimes the real treasure isn't in the ground but in the promise of what might be there. This promise has proven to be fatally seductive. The Superstition Mountains are a brutal, disorienting maze of sheer cliffs, deep canyons, and choking vegetation, all under a relentless desert sun. Since the 1890s, an estimated 8,000 people each year have ventured into this wilderness searching for the Dutchman's gold. For many, the search has ended in tragedy. There is Adolph Ruth, a Washington, D.C. bureaucrat who vanished in 1931 after obtaining what he believed was a secret map from Waltz's descendants. His skull was found months later with 2 gunshot holes in it, and his decapitated body was found far away. There's the case of James A. Cravey, whose mummified remains were discovered in a canyon in 1947, a cryptic note about being cold and vindicated clutched in his hand. More recently, in 2010, 3 Utah men hiked into the mountains convinced they had solved the puzzle. Only their bullet-riddled bodies were found at their campsite, victims of a brutal and unsolved ambush. The official causes range from exposure, dehydration, and falls to murder, but in the public imagination, they are all victims of the Dutchman's curse, a supernatural price for seeking a fortune that was never meant to be found. So, is there any geological truth behind the myth? Could a motherlode of gold truly be hidden in the Superstitions? The answer is a fascinating and qualified yes. The mountains are part of a massive volcanic field, and the region is indeed gold-bearing. The legendary Peralta family from Mexico were known to have mined gold there in the 1840s before they were supposedly massacred by Apaches, an event that itself may be more legend than fact. Small, worked-out mines and prospect holes dot the landscape, evidence that individual miners could and did find pockets of wealth. What is highly improbable, however, is the legend of a single, vast, undiscovered vein of unimaginably pure gold. The U.S. Geological Survey has thoroughly mapped the area and concluded that while there is gold, there is no evidence of a major deposit that could support the fabled scale of the Dutchman's mine. The gold that Waltz himself had was far more likely the result of careful, small-scale placer mining or the accumulated findings from several small claims, cleverly consolidated into a compelling story. Ultimately, the true power of the Lost Dutchman's story is not geological but psychological. It is the perfect American myth, born in the era of westward expansion and manifest destiny. It represents the dream of the individual prospector, the lone outsider who through grit, luck, or divine providence can stumble upon a fortune that makes him king. It's a story that taps into our deepest desires for instant wealth and a life free from toil. The curse, the deaths, and the perilous landscape are not bugs in this story, they are features. They are the necessary obstacles that make the prize seem worthy of the risk, separating the true believers from the faint of heart. The mine has never been found because the mine, in its most glorious form, never existed. It is a phantom, a story that we tell ourselves about the possibility of hidden wonder just beyond the next ridge. The real treasure of the Superstition Mountains is the myth itself, a tale that continues to draw people into its harsh, beautiful embrace, offering not gold, but the irresistible, dangerous chance to believe. From the sun-baked obsession of a lost gold mine, we now shift to a story steeped in shadow and dread, a chilling chapter of American folklore that intertwines a bizarre creature with a very real, devastating tragedy. In the small, blue-collar town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the autumn of 1966 began a 13-month period that would forever be etched in history as the time of the Mothman. It started not with a scream but with a drive through the night. On November 15th, two young couples were driving past a former World War II munitions plant area known locally as the TNT, a place of abandoned igloos and dense woodland. Their headlights swept across a field, illuminating a terrifying figure standing over 6 feet tall with massive wings folded against its back. As they sped away in panic, they claimed the creature took to the sky, following their car with incredible speed and emitting a high-pitched squeal, all without ever flapping its wings. This was the first of over 100 documented sightings of what the press would soon christen the Mothman, a being that would transform Point Pleasant from a quiet riverside community into the epicenter of a paranormal storm. The descriptions from witnesses were remarkably consistent, creating a profile of a creature that defied easy zoological classification. It was routinely described as a man-sized figure, often estimated at 6 to 7 feet tall, with a formidable wingspan of up to 10 feet. Its most haunting feature were its eyes, large, luminous, and red, described as seeming to glow from within, capable of inducing a paralyzing fear in those who met its gaze. Witnesses reported it could launch itself into the air vertically with incredible force and pursue cars at speeds alleged to be over 100 miles per hour. Its flight was often described as silent and unnerving, with some claiming it could maneuver without moving its wings at all. The abandoned TNT area became its primary haunt, with numerous reports of it being seen perched on the old igloos or swooping between the trees, a spectral sentinel guarding a forgotten corner of the world. The sheer volume of reports from credible witnesses, including sheriff's deputies, business owners, and firefighters, lent an air of credibility to the phenomenon that could not be easily dismissed as mere pranks or fabrications. Naturally, such an inexplicable wave of sightings demanded rational explanations, and skeptics were quick to offer them. The most prevalent theory points to a simple case of mistaken identity. The area around Point Pleasant is a major migratory route for large birds, most notably the sandhill crane. This bird stands up to 5 feet tall, has a wingspan of over 6 feet, and can appear much larger and more ominous in the dim twilight or in the glare of headlights. Its red forehead patch could potentially be misidentified as glowing eyes in a moment of panic. Another candidate is the great horned owl, a powerful nocturnal hunter whose silhouette in flight could be distorted by fear and whose reflective eyes could shine red in light. Proponents of the misidentification theory argue that the power of suggestion then took over. Once the story of the Mothman was seeded in the local consciousness, every strange shadow and every large bird became another sighting, fueling a classic feedback loop of mass hysteria. Yet, the story of the Mothman transcends mere monster sightings, taking on a far more ominous and prophetic dimension. As the sightings continued into 1967, a strange convergence of other phenomena occurred. The town was reportedly visited by mysterious men in black, figures in dark suits driving vintage cars who would question witnesses and then vanish. UFO sightings in the area spiked dramatically. And perhaps most chillingly, a local newspaper reporter named Mary Heyer and a volunteer firefighter named Connie Carpenter began receiving bizarre, cryptic phone calls. A voice, often described as mechanical or inhuman, would give them strange warnings and rambling prophecies. It was against this backdrop of escalating strangeness that the unthinkable happened. On the evening of December 15, 1967, the crowded Silver Bridge, a vital suspension bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, suddenly groaned, twisted, and collapsed into the icy waters of the Ohio River during the height of Christmas rush hour traffic. 46 people lost their lives in the horrific disaster. In the agonizing aftermath, the connection was instantly made. The Mothman sightings had ceased abruptly just before the bridge fell. Author John Keel, who had been in Point Pleasant investigating the phenomenon, would later solidify this link in his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, arguing that the creature was not a monster but a harbinger, a paranormal warning system that appears before catastrophic events. This idea transformed the Mothman from a West Virginian oddity into a global icon of ominous folklore. Was the creature an unknowable omen, trying in its own bizarre way to warn the town of the impending engineering failure? Did its appearance somehow correlate with the tragic event it seemingly foretold? Modern analysis offers a more psychological, though no less fascinating, perspective. The period leading up to the bridge's collapse was one of immense social and economic anxiety in Point Pleasant. The town was facing industrial decline, and the Cold War fear of nuclear annihilation was a constant, low hum in the background. Psychologists suggest that the Mothman may have been a communal manifestation of this deep-seated dread, a tangible, monstrous form for a formless anxiety about the future. The bridge, a symbol of connection and commerce, literally collapsing without warning, was the ultimate realization of those subconscious fears. The prophecies and strange phone calls could be explained as examples of cryptomnesia, where the subconscious mind pieces together forgotten information, perhaps unnoticed cracks or unsettling groans from the aging bridge, and expresses it through symbolic language and imagery during a time of intense psychological stress. The true, enduring power of the Mothman legend lies in this unresolved tension between the literal and the symbolic. It stubbornly resists a single, comfortable explanation. The sheer number of witnesses and the consistency of their accounts make a pure mass hysteria theory feel incomplete. Yet, the idea of a literal winged prophet of doom is a concept that defies our understanding of reality. The Mothman remains a powerful, haunting figure in American mythology because it represents the terrifying unknown that lurks just beyond the edge of our headlights. It is the embodiment of the feeling that something is terribly wrong before the disaster strikes, a warning we can sense but cannot understand. The creature itself has not been seen since that December night, but its legacy is forever fused with the tragedy of the Silver Bridge, a permanent reminder that some mysteries are not about what we saw, but about what we felt was coming. But if the cryptic phone calls of Point Pleasant represented a modern American mystery, our next event plunges us into the heart of Victorian London, into a fog-shrouded world of gaslight and grinding poverty where a predator emerged whose name would become synonymous with the very essence of evil. In the autumn of 1888, the impoverished district of Whitacapel was terrorized by a series of murders so brutal and so sexually charged that they would not only shock a nation but fundamentally change the way the world viewed serial crime. The killer, who would later taunt police and press with letters signed Jack the Ripper, targeted the most vulnerable women in society, prostitutes. His method was horrifyingly specific. He would slash their throats and then perform extensive mutilations, displaying a shocking knowledge of human anatomy by removing internal organs with a swift, precise skill that suggested medical or surgical training. In a matter of just a few months, 5 women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were confirmed to be his victims in what became known as the Canonical Five. Their lives ended in a whirlwind of violence that left no reliable witnesses and a city paralyzed with fear. The investigation was immense but hamstrung by the forensic limitations of the era. Without fingerprinting, DNA analysis, or even a unified police force, the City of London Police and the Metropolitan Police operated in separate jurisdictions, complicating the manhunt. Detectives relied on shoe leather and witness statements. They collected countless statements, followed up on anonymous tips, and even conducted door-to-door inquiries, but the Ripper's choice of location was a key to his evasion. Whitacapel was a labyrinth of narrow, poorly lit alleys and courtyards, a densely packed warren of common lodging houses and overflowing pubs where strangers were commonplace and people minded their own business. The thick, polluted fog that regularly blanketed the city provided the perfect cloak for his movements, allowing him to strike and vanish without a trace, leaving behind only butchered bodies and a growing sense of public panic that the police were utterly powerless. This lack of concrete evidence created a vacuum that has been filled with a dizzying array of suspects, each theory more elaborate than the last. The list of proposed Rippers reads like a who's who of Victorian society, reflecting the anxieties and prejudices of the time. One of the earliest and most persistent suspects was a man named Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish immigrant and hairdresser who was committed to an asylum in 1891. He was named as the prime suspect by senior police officials in memoranda, and modern DNA analysis on a shawl supposedly belonging to victim Catherine Eddowes has been controversially linked to him, though the reliability of both the shawl's provenance and the DNA testing itself has been fiercely debated by experts. Another prominent suspect was Montague John Drute, a barrister and teacher from a good family who committed suicide shortly after the final murder, a timing that many found suspiciously convenient. His own family reportedly believed he was the killer, though no solid evidence ever connected him to the crimes. The theories, however, quickly spiral into the realm of high conspiracy. Perhaps the most famous is the Royal Conspiracy, which posits that the Ripper killings were a cover-up to silence women who knew a devastating secret about Prince Albert Victor, the grandson of Queen Victoria. The story suggests the prince had secretly married and fathered a child with a Catholic shopgirl, and a rogue Freemason or royal physician was dispatched to eliminate anyone who could expose the scandal. While a thrilling plot for a novel, this theory is built on a foundation of rumor and supposition with no documentary evidence from royal archives to support it. Other suspects have included the celebrated artist Walter Sickert, based on the dark themes in his paintings and speculative connections, a deranged midwife or abortionist, and even a female killer dubbed Jill the Ripper, theorized to be seeking revenge on women who worked in her profession. The enduring fascination with Jack the Ripper stems from this perfect storm of factors: the gruesome nature of the crimes, the shadowy Victorian setting, the ineptitude of the investigation, and the sheer number of plausible yet unprovable suspects. He was the first modern serial killer to operate in the glow of mass media, with newspapers eagerly printing every grisly detail and the killer's own taunting letters, whipping the public into a frenzy and ensuring his legend would be immortalized. Modern criminal profilers have added their own insights, painting a picture of a man who was likely locally based, physically strong, and comfortable navigating the filthy streets of Whitacapel. They suggest he likely held a job that allowed him to be out at night without suspicion, perhaps one that involved the use of a knife, and that he possessed a deep-seated hatred for women, likely fueled by a personal trauma or rejection. Yet, even with all our advanced psychological understanding, his identity remains a locked box. He is a ghost in the machine of history, a single, malignant individual who, through a combination of skill, luck, and timing, achieved a dark form of immortality, ensuring that the name Jack the Ripper would forever be the answer to the ultimate question: who was he? Deep within the lush river valleys and banana plantations of southern Costa Rica lies a mystery carved from solid stone, hundreds of nearly perfect spheres, some small enough to cradle in your arms, others towering over 2 meters tall and weighing more than 16 tons. Discovered in the 1930s and 40s as the United Fruit Company cleared land for its plantations, these enigmatic orbs were unearthed by bulldozers, often buried in groups or arranged in mysterious patterns. The local workers, believing the spheres might contain hidden gold, took to dynamiting them, destroying an untold number before archaeologists could intervene. What remained, however, was enough to captivate the world: a collection of artifacts of such precise geometry and imposing presence that they seem to defy the technological capabilities of the pre-Columbian culture that created them. These are the stone spheres of the Diquis, and they represent one of the most unique and baffling artistic traditions of the ancient Americas. The sheer craftsmanship involved in their creation is a marvel in itself. Carved primarily from a hard, igneous rock called gabbro, as well as limestone and sandstone, the spheres were painstakingly pecked, ground, and polished using stone tools made from materials of equal or greater hardness. The process would have been agonizingly slow, requiring generations of dedicated labor and an extraordinary understanding of stoneworking. The most astounding aspect is their near-perfect sphericity. Studies of the larger spheres have shown them to be within centimeters of being mathematically perfect spheres, a level of precision that seems almost impossible to achieve without advanced measuring tools or techniques. How did the Diquis people, who flourished from around 800 AD until just before Spanish contact, achieve such symmetry? The leading theory suggests they likely used a combination of heating and cooling the stone to fracture it, then hammered it with other rocks to rough out the shape before finally grinding and polishing it with sand and water over countless hours. The final product would have had a smooth, almost unnatural sheen, a man-made moon resting on the tropical earth. But the most tantalizing question is not how they were made, but why. What purpose did these colossal orbs serve in Diquis society? The most widely accepted theory among archaeologists is that they were powerful symbols of social status and authority. The spheres are often found in association with the remains of chiefly houses, public plazas, and ceremonial architecture. Their size and perfection would have required a massive investment of labor, a clear demonstration of a chieftain's ability to command resources and manpower. In this view, the spheres were less about function and more about statement, a permanent physical declaration of power, lineage, and control over a territory. They were the ancient equivalent of a crown or a scepter, but on a monumental, landscape-altering scale. Some were even found arranged in alignments leading to the houses of important figures, literally paving the way to power with symbols of stone. This social explanation is compelling, but the arrangement of some spheres in specific patterns has led to a more celestial interpretation. Certain groups, particularly at key archaeological sites like Finca Sixaiola, were found placed in lines and triangles that appear to be aligned with astronomical phenomena. Some researchers propose these configurations could have functioned as a kind of observatory, with the spheres marking the rising and setting of certain stars or the solstice sun, helping to regulate agricultural cycles and ceremonial calendars. The Diquis culture, like many Mesoamerican societies, likely had a complex cosmology intertwined with the heavens. The spheres, as perfect representations of celestial bodies like the sun or the full moon, would have been the perfect medium to connect earthly power with the divine order of the cosmos, merging the social and the spiritual into a single, powerful symbol. Then there are the more speculative, though captivating, theories that have emerged from their mysterious presence. Their perfect shape and the logistical challenge of moving multi-ton stones have led some to propose connections to the lost continent of Atlantis, or to suggest they were navigational aids for extraterrestrial visitors. These ideas, while popular in certain circles, are thoroughly dismissed by archaeologists, who point to the clear evidence of their indigenous origin and the painstaking, albeit ingenious, methods available to the Dikwis people. A more grounded, yet still fascinating, idea is that the spheres were tactile representations of a fundamental philosophical concept, the ideal of perfection and harmony. The drive to create such a flawless object from rough stone might have been a spiritual or intellectual pursuit in itself, a way for the culture to express its worldview and its relationship with the natural world through geometry and form. The true tragedy, and the core reason the spheres remain so enigmatic, is that we may never know their full significance. The Dikwis culture was already in decline when the Spanish conquistadors arrived, and the subsequent introduction of European diseases and the brutal disruption of native societies led to the complete extinction of their original traditions and languages. The knowledge of what the spheres meant, the stories told about them, and the precise rituals they were part of died with their creators. Today, they stand as silent sentinels, their perfect curves a testament to a lost world of ingenuity and belief. They resist a single, simple explanation, and perhaps that is their greatest power. They are not just archaeological artifacts, they are a permanent question, inviting us to ponder the minds that could conceive of such perfection, and the society that believed such beauty was worth the immense effort to bring it into the world. And so we reach the end of our journey through 30 of history's most stubborn and captivating puzzles. From the silent, sandy void left by the Roanoke colonists to the haunting cosmic whisper of the wow signal, from the intricate gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the uncrackable code of the Voynich Manuscript, we've traversed centuries and continents in search of answers, only to find that some doors remain firmly locked. These aren't merely gaps in a history book, they are profound reminders of the limits of our understanding. They represent moments where the trail runs cold, where the evidence contradicts itself, and where the story we think we know simply falls apart, leaving us with nothing but questions and a thrilling sense of wonder. What ties these 30 mysteries together is not a common thread of solution, but a shared theme of human curiosity itself. They showcase our relentless drive to explore, to categorize, and to explain the world around us. Yet they also humble us, demonstrating that for all our advanced technology and accumulated knowledge, the past still holds onto its secrets with a fierce grip. These enigmas challenge the very notion of a linear, predictable history, suggesting instead a past filled with brilliant flashes of innovation that flickered and died, with tragic disappearances that defy logic, and with phenomena that straddle the line between natural occurrence and something truly otherworldly. They force us to acknowledge that history is not a solved puzzle, but a living, breathing mystery, still being written and rewritten with every new discovery. This, ultimately, is why we are so drawn to these stories. They tap into a deep, fundamental human need for mystery and discovery. They invite us to become detectives ourselves, to look at the available clues and dare to imagine a different possibility. Was the lost colony really assimilated with the Croatan people? Did a massive methane bubble sink the merry Celeste? Could the Nazca lines truly be a message to the gods? There are no definitive answers, and that is precisely the point. The value lies in the debate, in the collaborative effort to piece together the fragments of a story that may never be complete. Now, the most fascinating part of this entire exploration begins, the conversation. We want to hear from you. Which of these 30 mysteries keeps you up at night, turning over the possibilities in your mind? Do you have a personal theory on the identity of the Somerton Man or the purpose of the Georgia Guidestones that you've been dying to share? The comments section is your open forum. Dive in, discuss your ideas, debate with fellow history sleuths, and let's continue this collective investigation together. The search for answers is always better with more minds on the case. If this journey into the unknown has captivated you, if you're eager to keep unraveling the tangled threads of our past, then you're in the right place. We are dedicated to bringing you more deep dives into history's greatest enigmas, archaeological discoveries, and forgotten stories. To make sure you never miss an exploration, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications. Our next adventure is just around the corner, waiting to challenge what you think you know about the world. Thank you for watching, and remember, some of the greatest stories ever told are the ones